OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
7:30 this morning, very welcome along to OTB AM. Even when it looks on paper like it's going to be a crappy night of Champions League action, it still delivers, Owen Sheahan. It still delivers. Maybe it would be good if the best European teams could play each other week in, week out in some kind of, I don't know, Super League. We might need to work on the branding a little bit.
Yeah, my favourite part about last night was that watching this thing unfold on the BT Sport goal show. That's how I watched it last night, because I hadn't watched any goal show all group stages long, and I was like, this is my last chance. Tomorrow night, these are my last chances. My favourite part was that these really esteemed football journalists just slowly got brought down to the rest of our level, that they realised that football isn't about goals. Football isn't about great artistry, good attackers, top-class strikers providing the magic that we think we love. Football is about violence. That's what we want to see. We want to see aggression. And that was my favourite part last night, those people in studio just sitting around actually kind of salivating over the fact that, yes, Pepe may actually be leading his Porto charges into battle against the shithouse that is Atletico Madrid. And it was just beautiful to watch. I was like, don't give me goals. Give me all of these brawls in this game between two titans of being, I guess, bad boys, really.
Yeah, I mean, just you really wish that you could have seen Jose Mourinho's Porto versus the Atletico Madrid side of it at any point, really, over the last while, but particularly the one that isn't quite as talented as the other Atletico Madrid teams, which is kind of where we might be at the moment. Okay, everybody get in touch, giving me grief about how amazing this current team is, but there's something of the fade at the moment going on. They're not quite as close to winning this competition as they have been in recent seasons. It feels, maybe I'm wrong, and maybe they're about to explode into life inspired by actions last night, but can you imagine what Jose Mourinho's Porto, or even peak Pepe, would have been able to do? Because it felt a little bit like it was the sides were unmatched last night.
A little bit, yeah. Like I definitely don't think you're in any danger by saying that Atletico Madrid aren't in great shape at the moment. Like they're 10 points off the lead in La Liga. There is certainly a lot of question marks about what's actually gone wrong for them this season. They managed to win the game last night, 3-0, let's not forget, with 32% of possession. So it's not exactly as if they've come in here with a swashbuckling style and have assured their dominance over a Porto team who they should be better than. Porto were the better footballing team last night, but they got absolutely done by Atletico in a most Atletico way. Even before all the fighting started, the way that Antoine Griezmann just finds himself at the back post, the ball just, I guess, makes its way through a number of bodies and it's in the back of the net. A poxy enough goal, I think it's fair to say, was very Atletico. They will possibly take a big scalp in the knockout stages, but to suggest that they're going to go all the way, I think it's a bit of a stretch. I do think that your concerns about what they can actually do in this competition are real. I don't think anybody thinks that they can go and win it, but they're going to cause so many problems for teams. And you would love to see in some sort of, maybe next year, if Roma somehow have a fantastic end to the season, Simeone against Jose in next year's Champions League would be a fantasy matchup. It's not going to happen, but it would be brilliant to see before Jose and his career ride off into the sunset.
So if people were watching a full game last night and didn't actually see what happened, what did happen?
Well, so Atletico win 3-0. At 1-0, there is a pretty big brawl, and what happens is that Atletico obviously 1-0 up. Yannick Carrasco takes the ball over by the sideline, right beside the dugouts on that sideline, and starts running away from it. The Porto player is like, hey, give me that ball back. Hey, it's our throw in. Give me that ball back. We want to keep this game going. And Carrasco's like, no, screw you, and lashes out at the man chasing him to get the ball back. That man goes down and Carrasco gets sent off. And this is where Porto, you know, with Pepe in their side, with plenty of experience, with a bit of know-how, to say the least, should have said, okay, let's cool the jets, let's relax here a little bit, and let's use this extra man and turn this whole thing around. But a few minutes later, there was another brawl, and this kind of played right into Atletico's hands, where there was another moment where hands got a little bit high and Wendell got sent off for Porto. I will say Cunha's reaction for Atletico was pretty embarrassing. He knew what he was doing at that moment to try and level things up. And from then, when it was 10 men versus 10 men, he knew that Porto's race had been run a little bit. And Atletico scored twice in the break. Correa with the first one, De Paul with the second one. And as I say, Porto, more shots, 68% of the possession, but they couldn't make that extra man count for like the 3 seconds that they had the extra man for. And it was a very trademark way for Atletico to knock them out of the competition.
Yeah, and like I don't think anybody wants to see Atletico Madrid's name popping out in the draw beside them, because you know that you're going to have to go through this. It's like 2 trips to the dentist, where at the end of it you might come out with better teeth, or who knows, maybe you're going to come out with an extraction.
You'd love to see Chelsea or Manchester United now get Atletico Madrid. Especially Chelsea, you know, I think that there's enough maybe about Thomas Tuchel that would suggest to me that he perhaps sees himself as above this Atletico team. That it's like, you know, we're the champions here. We're not going to be allowed to be brought down to your level. And I think there could be a good degree of comedy that comes out of the frustration that Chelsea would experience in a matchup with Atletico. Of course, Liverpool have been here before, obviously in the same group, so it's not going to happen. But when Liverpool were looking so good in that 2019-20 season, obviously Atletico punctured their European run. So I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever to get through on 7 points. I mean, there are a number of teams who've gone out. Dortmund, for example, have gone crashing out on 9 points. So Atletico have gone through on 7 points, and I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever to see them in the last 8 when this thing finishes up.
What else happened last night? Go on.
They're definitely going to draw like Ajax, like poor Ajax, the team that I think we can all get behind as a neutral in this year's competition. The first Dutch team ever to win all 6 games in the Champions League group stages. Sebastian Haller, the fastest player to score 10 goals in Champions League history. 6 matches is all it's taken him to reach double figures. Only the second player after Ronaldo in 17-18 to score in every game of the group stages. So he's certainly turned his career around in sensational form since leaving West Ham. But if you're preparing fate, then I would say Atletico are going to get the poxy draw and get Ajax in the next round, even though Ajax are obviously an excellent team. So they kept their 100% record up last night. To be honest with you, Ger, I'm liking your Real Madrid candidacy. If we're talking about the Madrid teams here, like listening to Modric after the game, he's saying age doesn't matter, only performances matter. I feel very good, like I'm barely 30 years old. We're very happy with the result. We want to be first and avoid the strongest teams. Like Kroos scored a brilliant goal from outside the box. Marco Asensio scored an absolute screamer, the beautiful double woodwork finish to it, which just makes it all the sweeter. And you have to say, especially with what they have on the sideline, they're right in the mix with, say, Liverpool as a team that you can be confident that they're not going to let you down at any point in this competition, even if there are better teams in it.
Yeah, so I was checking the odds yesterday. Real Madrid yesterday before kick-off were 16-1. Maybe they've shortened after beating Inter last night, but not much. It seems like it's quite a big price. Why are people so non-believing or so out on Real Madrid? Like, what is it about? Is it the fact that they're not the same team as they were when they were winning the Champions League? Because, I mean, almost every team is different this year.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe we just associate the Real Madrid success with Cristiano Ronaldo, and without Cristiano Ronaldo, we just can't accept that they could possibly be Champions League winners. But it doesn't really make sense, does it, when you look through the team that they have? Obviously, no Benzema last night. Jovic started again. Not started again, he played at the weekend, came off the bench, but he started last night against Inter. But Vinicius just looks sensational in every game at the moment, and he's really arrived at the level that people would have expected him to. But it's that midfield, isn't it? It's Casemiro, Kroos and Modric, which is just 3 wily veterans who you can trust. Now, I mean, that's Real Madrid midfield did get found out a little bit when they did get knocked out in last year's Champions League, but maybe that was a bit more of a once-off.
Yeah, it's hard to know. Like we've seen a cobbled together Real Madrid team win the Champions League in the past, and this cobbled together Real Madrid team has David Alaba at centre back and some superstar kids coming through who, if they were to win it with an amazing performance over the next 5 games, we'd be like, oh, well, that was obvious because that's the birth of a superstar.
Yeah, for sure. Now, like, I mean, you look at them and you say, like, why isn't there kind of more of a movement towards them? And like that confusion is kind of only added to when you look at the fact that they're about 8 points clear at top of La Liga at the moment. But maybe we actually just get to a point where there will be 3 English teams in the semi-finals. Obviously, it's draw dependent, but I certainly wouldn't be surprised if you did have Liverpool, Chelsea and Manchester City in the semi-finals. Now, Pep Guardiola is fuming this morning with Kyle Walker. Maybe we don't see Kyle Walker in the next round of the Champions League. He says, I'm not coming here to say what will happen in the dressing room with regards to Walker's red card. But you certainly look at them as a step above. But are we actually just kind of rushing to that conclusion a little bit when you look at the Real Madrid candidacy, as it were? When you talk about Bayern Munich, like who is the fourth team then when you bring Paris Saint-Germain into the mix? If you're going to suggest that three English teams are going to make the semi-finals, it's going to be very, very interesting knockout stages.
Well, that's the thing. The draw will decide a lot of this, right? Because you can get an easy. It's not an easy draw, but there's definitely a path to the semi-finals, which is easy compared with some other paths. Yeah,
and we'll know on Monday how things shape up on that front. Like, I mean, the suggestion had been over the last little while as well that, I mean, I guess we got kind of bogged down on Solskjaer's first few weeks and that win in Paris, but there had been a suggestion that maybe Manchester United could do something special on the European stage as well, given they may not have the squad or they may not have the consistency to do anything in the Premier League, but on any given night they could take anybody, and they will certainly be in the mix as well, you suspect, as things go deep. But we'll know a lot more on Monday when it comes down to it, but we can make a pretty big guess that those three Liverpool teams that aren't Manchester United, I think there's still enough question marks about them. Those three teams are absolutely going to be in the mix once we get to the business stages of this year's competition.
Those three English teams, yeah, of course. Right, if anybody wants to get in touch, 53106 is the text number. You can leave a comment in the YouTube stream, or you can get in touch with us any other way you want this morning, at Off The Ball on Twitter or at Off The Ball AM. OTB AM is brought to you by Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. Divock Origi rewarded with the start last night, and it's a meaningless game, but still they put out a very good team. It was an interesting team selection by Klopp. I kind of felt that maybe he was going to give more fringe players the opportunity last night, and maybe he did. Maybe in his head he did. But like, why is Salah getting game time last night? What's that about, do you think?
Is it to do with the fact that they knew that Liverpool could become the first English club to win all 6 games in the Champions League?
Does that matter? Like, what, you know, there's no special prize for that?
No, but it's just another thing to kind of set yourself apart from the pack with. Like, I think it's not the first time Klopp has done this. Famously happened at the end of the group stages last year when Jota got injured and he played a very, very strong team. I just think that maybe winning is a habit, and Salah was not going to. Maybe they make a decision that Salah's not going to benefit overly from taking midweek off, that he is already being burnt out to a point. Himself and Mane are heading off next month, provided the virus doesn't stop the African Cup of Nations. That maybe, if you're looking at it in a cynical way, they're trying to sweat Salah and Mane as much as they can before they go off on international duty. But the problem with that, though, is that he's done this last season, and it's nothing new. And if there was no AFCON, would he have done the same thing? And probably. Like, I guess the thing is, you take Salah and Mane off in the second half. For me, the big thing yesterday was that, like, they did make changes. Like, you look at, say, their back four: Tsimikas, Williams, Konate and Phillips, and they were still a good deal better than AC Milan, who were top of Serie A. I know it's a young AC Milan team and they're only on the upward trajectory, but there was a bit of a gulf, it seemed, last night. I mean, 22 shots to 8. Like, I mean, there could have been an opportunity for Milan late on. I know you have that Zlatan bicycle kick and maybe one or two other half opportunities. But it seemed that Liverpool, there was a bit of a distance between them and the leaders of Serie A last night. And that kind of comes back to the idea that you can really make a case, draw depending, that these three English teams are going to make it to the semi-finals. That right now it's the Premier League's world, and the rest of the Champions League teams are just trying to live in it.
Yeah, so if the draw worked out, you're saying that who's the fourth team for you? Is it Bayern or is it Real Madrid?
It's hard to know. Like, I don't think we can put the pin in Paris Saint-Germain just yet. Like, I mean, it is just, you throw enough money at a project and it is bound to come up big eventually. Granted, they let a lot of people down with the showing against Manchester City when it really mattered last season. But, like, Messi scored twice last night. He's probably going to come good in the second half of the season. Mbappe, the youngest player to reach 30 Champions League goals with his brace last night. I think we sometimes forget just how young Mbappe is, and that we're still talking about himself and Haaland as the two successors to Messi and Ronaldo's throne. That the transition hasn't fully happened just yet. I think we sometimes talk about Mbappe as somebody who's already fully formed and has been around for a long, long time and is almost a fully experienced player. He's not, and I think that PSG are going to ride that this year in the sense that Mbappe will be like, maybe I want to get out of the club, maybe I want to go for a Ballon d'Or next year, whatever it may be. I think PSG stand to benefit from whatever Mbappe will do, because 2021 hasn't exactly been the easiest year for him. So I definitely think PSG Real Madrid, Bayern Munich will be the other three candidates for that. But as we all know, it's never that simple, and there will be somebody who gets lucky with a good run to the semi-finals.
All right, and the fact that Paris Saint-Germain were pretty straightforward winners last night. Messi back amongst the goals. That early season chatter around Messi not really working out, that's all disappeared. Everybody's like, well, he's just won the Ballon d'Or and he's back scoring goals and he's back assisting, and it looks like they're all getting on, the front three anyway, when they're on the field of play. So it is all trending towards. It's been quite a boring group stages, I would have said. Apart from the brawl last night, it's been very straightforward. The teams that you expect to come through have come through. There's been no upsets. In previous years, the group stages have been lit. There's been a good team going out early, and what that means is that you end up with very uneven round of last 16, and sometimes all the way up to uneven semi-finals, or mediocre enough sides in semi-finals. Mediocre enough sides, like that Spurs team was a mediocre team, really, if we would look back particularly on how they played that year, and they made it all the way through to the final. But when all the best teams make it through, it means that the next stage from then on, all the games are good, they're all meaningful, and they become kind of special.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I do think that tonight now could be something. The Barcelona story does keep a lot of people interested tonight, but I'd agree with you. I do think it's been a grand group stages. I think that the gulf between some of the top clubs and the rest is really starting to show up over the next little while, and I think that's why a lot of people over the last little while, and I think that's why a lot of people were pretty annoyed with the suggestion last year that maybe the group stages gets expanded as a means to bringing the Champions League into more people's lives and all that. I just don't think that works. I think that it's close to a perfect format as it is. I think that when you have such an unbelievably high quality knockout stages, the price you pay for that is an average enough group stages. Now, in fairness, like as I say, you do the Barcelona thing. You also have Group G tonight, as we mentioned yesterday, where all four teams can qualify in that. And I think that people will watch anything if there was something on the line. And sure, maybe people haven't watched a lot of Lille, Salzburg, Sevilla or Wolfsburg already this season. But I think when the top team is on 8 points and the bottom team is on 5 points, you're looking at that group tonight and you're saying, I'm watching that. I'm happy on Group G for the first time this season, and people will get on board. So there's enough drama to go around, I think, come the last couple of game days of the Champions League group stages anyway.
Real Madrid's odds have eased actually after last night. They're in from 16 to 14 to 1. One of the things that we were having this conversation yesterday in a piece, it's our annual crystal ball, and one of the things that got spoken about was Erling Haaland, and Adrian Barry came up with what I thought at the time completely ridiculous suggestion that he might leave at Christmas and join somebody else. I mean, it's not. It would be ridiculous, right? It would be completely ridiculous for anybody to come up with the money that it would be required. But if you're Dortmund and you're going to lose him for less money in the summer, and you're now out of the Champions League, is it entirely beyond the bounds of possibility that he leaves?
No, absolutely not. I don't think it's beyond the bounds possibility at all at any point throughout his career, but particularly when your team is not going to be playing Champions League football for the rest of the season. Came off the bench last night, scored twice. Borussia Dortmund not going to be involved. Erling Haaland, I guess, over the next little while, could potentially feel that he's on the outside looking in on a lot of levels. Like, Norway have perhaps underachieved at international level by not qualifying for any of the tournaments recently as well, and he'll feel all these big things are happening and I'm not involved in them, and the Champions League knockout stages in 2022 is going to be one of them as well. So there has to be a bit of a personal ambition there. He's been outstanding again this season, and at 21 years of age, I think that he's just ripe for picking for a lot of those top teams as well. He's the question really is, when you look at some of the finances of some of the other teams, like particularly in Spain, are they in a position to pay, what will it be, £135 million, £150 million to get this guy? I'm not sure if they can. So he may have to look to the Premier League or to PSG to actually get that move. Like, we all know how the Dortmund superstar story goes, that Bayern Munich come in eventually and sign him. But I think at this point, Haaland has to see out this season and maybe even next season before Bayern Munich can get to that price tag.
Yeah, look, I think it's very unlikely, and I just checked the table, they're 4 points behind after the weekend controversy. So maybe he just plays out this season at least and sees how it goes, and then it is a feeding frenzy. But the fact that they just didn't make it through to the last 16, and with the change in rules recently about being cup tied, the door's open for somebody to decide that, yeah, we're going to win this year. It's going to cost us 200 million, and at the end of it, we're going to have the champion Champions League trophy and we're going to have the best player, the best striker in Europe at the moment. It's not really the worst idea if you're one of those oligarchs who's used to getting what they want.
Yeah, I mean, signing Erling Haaland is absolutely not a bad idea in any shape or form. I think he just fits so well with a lot of the different projects that are going on around Europe at the moment, and there's certainly like a couple of the Premier League teams that you think, right, this could definitely work. We were having this conversation yesterday on the show about if Liverpool had a blank check, I think they're probably the least likely of the English teams to be able to go for him. But if they had a blank check, how well would he work with them? I think maybe he's the one team that you can make a case for that actually he would disrupt the system just a little bit. Like, would Mo Salah still be Mo Salah if he has Erling Haaland playing beside him? Maybe he would. Like, I mean, maybe everybody just gets to a whole other level with him. But just imagine what Manchester City would be with him in the team, or what Chelsea could be with him in the team, or even Manchester United. Like, those are the three teams that would stand to benefit so much from this guy in the team, and it would be a pretty terrifying prospect if that was the move that he made. Terrifying in the context of, say, La Liga or the Bundesliga.
Or European football. We should mention there's a great Paul McShane interview that he did with Joe Malloy last night on the Football Show. You can get that wherever you get your podcasts. Best place, obviously, is the OTB Sports app. And Gio Bennett was ripping it up for Rotherham last night. We're kind of hopeful that he gets a move. Or maybe the right thing to do is to stick around and have a season where you absolutely show everybody what your highest level is and then get the move.
Yeah, like, I mean, it's looking, given Rotherham's form, that he will be playing Championship football next season, regardless, in a system that he's familiar with, in a club that I would suggest is starting to become a fully signed up member of the Ogbene cult at this point. I would say that actually staying in situ, assuming they get promoted, might be the move for him, because you make that gradual step up to the Championship next season. I know Rotherham have obviously struggled when they've got up there over the past 5 or 6 years, and just see how he gets on up at the next stage. There had been suggestion that he gets a move away from the club, but really, why would you leave assuming they get promoted? Of course, there's the opportunity to play with a team who will be fighting for Premier League contention to get promoted from the Championship. But you do half a season in the Championship first with Rotherham, don't you, if they get promoted, and see how things go, and then make that gradual step up. He's on the upward trajectory himself personally, but he's also playing for a club that's on the upward trajectory. He's in a good place at the moment, it looks like.
Yeah, I think the confidence of playing in a good team, that's definitely going to be helpful. And, at the same time, sometimes you've got to ride these good bursts of form to get the move to, well, increase your salary for a start, but just to get into a better environment. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with the environment at the moment, but
no.
Is there a team who's at the upper echelons of the Championship who might be interested in an explosive player with his talent? There might be.
But it's an interesting point, because I mean, what is how big is the difference between somebody playing at Ogbene's level and scoring like he's scoring and playing like he's playing, and somebody who is at the top of the Championship? Like, by and large, you should say the average is that there is a big difference. But there are players who slip through the cracks, and there are players who are playing at a level below where they should be. And maybe there have been glimpses from what we've seen from Ogbene at international level that would suggest that he is playing at a substantially lower level than he can do. And actually riding this out and using this bounce and form to actually get that move, maybe the step up that he needs in his career to actually circumvent a few years of just grinding things out at this level as well. So I can see that, and I'm sure that any Championship teams who are going to be looking to make the step up to become a playoff team or a promotion team next season are looking at a team like Rotherham coming up from League One and seeing how can we cherry pick them before they get too comfortable in this division. So you could see why that move would happen in the off season for sure.
All right. Here's what's coming up between now and 10 o'clock this morning. Paddy Agnew is standing by. We're going to talk to him about Serie A and the Champions League this week. Keith Wood's going to join us at 8:10 to talk about what's being posited as Munster's biggest European challenge. We've got the sports pages for you at 8:30 and sports news at 8:40 with John Duggan. Wesley O'Brien at 8:50. He's going to talk to us about fundraising for refugees through tennis in Greece. Ronan Mullen at 9:10 going to talk to us about Katie Taylor this weekend, and Paul McShane. We're going to play some highlights from that interview last night with Joe Malloy. Now, I'm delighted to say Paddy Agnew is with us. Paddy, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning. I'm fine.
I'm going to start with a commenter on YouTube, which we don't always do, but Dahi says AC Milan, top of Serie A, play their strongest team, beaten by effectively Liverpool's B team. What's up with Serie A? Serie A looks pretty exciting at the moment, so maybe it's the wrong way to frame this conversation, but Liverpool handled their business pretty easily last night.
Yeah, I must say I agree with you. I watched the two Milan sides were playing last night, obviously Inter and AC Milan, but I watched the AC Milan game because Inter were already qualified, and I frankly at no stage before even, but at no stage during the game did I think AC Milan were going to win it. It's not true to say that we're feeling their strongest team. The number of players missing, but nonetheless, the players who've been very important for them throughout the season and who did play last night, like for example, the French fullback Teo Fernandez, to some extent, Ibanez, Ibrahim up in front, they just didn't play in the night. And it seemed to me to be a little bit intimidated by the Liverpool reputation.
Is that really where AC Milan are at the moment? That this isn't a team who has a backbone of players who fully understand exactly what it means to qualify from the group stages of the Champions League and to go toe-to-toe with a team like Liverpool. That we're seeing a young side evolve, and that we shouldn't expect too much of them just yet, despite the fact that they're fighting it out at the top of Serie A at the moment.
Yeah, I think most people would agree. They, they're top of Serie A at the moment, but frankly, Inter, Atalanta, Napoli look like the three sides that were going to fight out the title this season, and Milan are not really in anybody's. They talk as if they want to win the title, but I don't think they've got the overall strength. I mean, it's indicative that last night they had to, bring Ibrahimovic off the injury bench basically to lead the attack, and he didn't do an awful lot, did he?
Is that his last game in the competition? Do you reckon Zlatan's last game?
That's one would think so. I mean, he's 39 now, isn't he? He's not going to. Can't expect him to play on for a lot longer.
It's interesting, isn't it, considering that has been the one thing that has given, I presume, a lot of Milan fans hope, the sense that this is a very young squad, this is a squad going in the right direction, and it's a squad for the future, and yet at the same time there is maybe a little bit of a reliance on a 39-year-old striker.
Yeah, you said it. The thing about Ibrahimovic is that you can't really call him a striker anymore because, he doesn't have he's a lot slower than he used to be. So he plays behind the front man really, and he's there. And he has been very successful, particularly since he came back from America Christmas last year. I mean, he's been very successful at putting a whole different shape on this Milan side because he is so experienced and he's got a lot of tricks. He can still use his headlock. He can still spray the ball about. He is still effective. He too is an intimidating presence in the penalty area, the set pieces, etc., etc. So for all those reasons, he's done a great job for AC Milan. But, if you're talking about winning the title, if you're talking about doing well in the Champions League, I'm not sure that he is the answer. He's certainly not the long-term answer.
It's very hard to see a team who has Ibrahimovic in it as having a specific identity in the modern terms of it, unless maybe there is an old-school Catenaccio at play at Milan. How would you describe this Milan team right now?
Well, I don't think it's like Catenaccio. I mean, purely the coach, if you look at it, he and certainly it's an effect of Italy winning the European Championship in the summer. But I mean, a lot of the sides have been a bit more aggressive this season, and Pioli pays a lot of time with leaving just as two central defenders on a man-to-man situation with a lot of guys up front. His fullbacks, people like Fernandez are normally spend more time in the opposition's half of the field than in their own. He didn't do that last night, by the way, Fernandez, but that's another story. But so it's not that they're playing an old type Catenaccio. It's just that there are a lot of players on that side that haven't had the experience of Champions League football, and this year will have been this run through this autumn will have done them a lot of good.
In terms of the Inter team at the moment and their identity, what are they? Who are they? What are they playing like?
Well, if you had to ask me who's going to win the championship this year, the Serie A championship, I'd say Inter. Basically, Conte came to Inter, 3 years ago now, and he set about, as he always does, crafting a seriously aggressive side and creating a winning mentality, and he succeeded. Now they've lost arguably certainly two of their best players last year in Lukaku and Hakimi, the full-back stroke right side midfielder. But I mean, and they've got a new coach in Simone Inzaghi, who've done well with Lazio. They started off the season with a few hiccups here and there, inevitably having, changed personnel. But they're starting to play like a seriously good team at the moment. Last Saturday, they absolutely humiliated Jose Mourinho's Roma. They were 3-0 up at the Olympic Stadium in Rome after half an hour. And, they look like a very, very good team. And they were already qualified when they played Real Madrid last night. They didn't play too badly by all accounts. They were probably probably should have unlucky to be 1-0 down at half time, but they never recovered from that. Then they managed to get somebody sent off. They got Barella, their important midfielder. They got him sent off. But anyway, those are the details for the next leg of the Champions League for them. The important thing is that for the first time in about 10 seasons, they're back in. They've got beyond the group stage of the Champions League, which they've under various different coaches in the last few years, they've got so far, but not into the second round.
Was there a sense, Paddy, maybe about 3 or 4 years ago, when players started to come to Serie A with greater regularity, players of a really high profile, that this was going to become a league that could properly challenge the likes of the Premier League and La Liga? And how much did the summer of last year damage that? I mean, the fact that Lukaku and as you say, Hakimi got brought away and tempted away from Inter Milan pretty easily, it seemed, once the cash actually was forthcoming.
I don't think anybody who follows Italian football closely would think for a second there was any way that the Serie A is going to compete with the Premiership or indeed even Spanish football, or indeed at times German football at the moment. I think when I first came here 35 years ago, this was the Hollywood of football, and this was where it was all happening. It was by a long way the best European league at the time. But it's that's a long time ago, and that's not the way things are at the moment. What people feel is, and what Milan, AC Milan, Inter Milan less, Napoli to some extent, but certainly what Italian clubs are having to learn is that they've got to spend a lot more time and energy and thought in their youth teams and develop their own players. And that, Italy's increasingly, it seems to me, is going to play a market for improving young players, mainly Italian, but obviously some young foreigners who, if they're really good, will want to move on to Spain or England. And it's a market for them, and of course for aging stars, because we're, Ibrahimovic is the obvious example, but the Ronaldo's to some extent, although you mightn't call him he's different. But anyway, players who seem to be at the end of their careers coming here for a last hurrah.
That's really interesting, right? Because, I mean, I think a lot of us of a certain age will remember that period of time when it was the Hollywood of football. We would tend to, in the past, have said, these things are cyclical, Serie A will make a comeback. But the way you're talking, it feels like it's actually there's a track here, and it's not a cycle that we're not going to see Juventus or AC Milan or Inter bubble back up to being a true European superpower again. Is that the case?
Well, the moment's very hard to predict them doing that. But you have to say that you have to qualify that by saying this is a country where football matters a lot. And, you know, hands up who expected Italy to win the European Championships. What I would say is that the European Championship, the win, proved that there's a fundamental seam of talent that runs through Italian football and isn't going to go away. There's no sense of that going away. What the problem is that top-level club football today is a very, very big business. And in business terms, very few of the Italian clubs have actually caught up. And, you know, they've been stuck in a very parochial Italian view of the world and haven't plugged into the globalized multinational world, of which the Premiership is the best example. And they're trying to play catch up on it now. For example, you know, I will give you a small example, but it's revealing enough. Like, you know, Juventus of the big Italian clubs, Juventus remain the only one who have their own club. The rest of the team are their own football pitch, their own stadium. The rest of the clubs continue to play in state-owned, you know, city corporation-owned stadiums, and you know, they lose quite a lot in revenue because of that. It's just a small thing, but I mean, a lot of the sides now, Roma, Lazio, Fiorentina, Bologna, they've all got plans to build themselves a new stadium. But I mean, that's something they should have been thinking about 30 years ago.
It certainly leaves them behind. The counter-argument is, of course, then that you don't get yourselves into the 600 million debt that, say, Spurs have. But the point about the globalisation is really interesting because Italian migrants, you know, famously travelled around the world, and so there would be a willing market wherever you want to do some business. And you would have thought that a brand name like Juventus or Milan would have been able to somehow capitalise the way that the English clubs have done on their globalised markets, but it doesn't seem to be the case.
Well, they had to a certain extent. I mean, I think Milan claimed to have 400 million fans around the world, right? Or something like that. I heard that figure quoted just the other day. The question is, you know, there are one or two exceptions to the rule, and Milan, Juventus would be the two most obvious ones. Inter have got quite a few. I've got a big following in Asia too. But for historical, colonial reasons, as well as for football reasons, the Premiership wins the day when you get onto the international market.
And just on that, then, I'm not really sure how connected this is, but there was maybe the sense back in April when the Super League was in the headlines that maybe Andrea Agnelli represented the greatest sympathiser towards it. He was the greatest force for the Super League at that point. Is there a view within Italian football, Paddy, that goes along with the sympathetic tone towards the Super League? Because I know maybe the last time we heard from Agnelli, he said, I'm not giving up on this thing just yet.
Yeah, I think the answer is yes, because I mean, the Super League failed, at least failed thus far, because of English fans, Chelsea fans, Manchester United fans, and others, no? And when it was announced here at first, in the first couple of days before it failed, there was no question of a lot of people said, "Oh God, I don't like that. That isn't a good idea." But there was no question of a fan revolt here. Therefore, I think a lot of fans here would see it as. They'd see it as inevitable. They'd see that Agnelli's interest in it was prompted by the fact that he was trying to raise extra cash in view of the fact that he was denied a lot of box office receipts from because of COVID, and he was trying to sort of fill the hole.
The one other thing then, obviously the one club we haven't mentioned, I guess, in the context of Italian football is Atalanta, and it's a huge match tonight, possibly the biggest match of the night. It's Atalanta against Villarreal. They're at home tonight. Winner goes through. How are they fixed for this, Paddy? What sort of a season has it been for Atalanta, and are they still at that level when they did get to the knockout stages a couple of seasons ago?
Yeah, the answer is I'd say they're well fixed for it. They're, you come to these games and, so much depends on how many injuries you have and how the mood is, but they're absolutely in terrific form at the moment, They they've delivered some wonderful football even this season. They've started off a little bit slowly, but they're starting to play well now, and I would expect him to use a Jack Charlton term. I really expect him to give it a lash tonight. And if I had to put money down tonight, I'd put it on Atalanta. I mean, they're also playing at home as well in their own. By the way, Atalanta, one of the things about them, terrific scouting system, very tight business organisation. They have their own stadium, a lovely little stadium up in Bergamo, and this will be, it's only a relatively new stadium, and they're really looking forward to celebrating their new stadium with what is clearly one of the biggest European games, the home European games they've ever played.
Yeah, one of the true stories of maybe how you should do your business in Italian football over recent years. Paddy, always great to have you with us. Thanks a million for making the time for us.
Thank you.
It's Paddy Agnew live from Rome there this morning, giving us some insights into the story of Italian football at the moment. It is 12 minutes past 8 this morning on OTB AM. We're brought to you by Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. We're going to take a quick break. There's loads more to come, including Keith Wood, your opportunity to win €1,000 in cash, courtesy of our friends at Whoop. And we'll be talking boxing as well a little bit later on. If you've got any comments for us, drop us a line on the YouTube channel, or of course tweet us at OffTheBallAM.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
What can we take from this performance?
Keep up to date with the latest WSL action and the biggest interviews.
How much she enjoyed that goal, a little bit too much in terms of... I wasn't a big fan of the Ronaldo celebration.
Subscribe to the Koi Gig podcast stream on the OTB Sports app now.
The Football Pod with Paddy and Andy, our new weekly Gaelic football show with Paddy Andrews and Andy Moran.
It's one thing in Mayo there, or in Kildare and Laois as well, they're generally lads all from the same background. Arsenal here is pretty much like the United Nations. There's 7 or 8 different languages spoken in the dressing room. There's 15 or 20 nationalities across the team. I think off the squad now, from when I arrived in 2015, I believe there's 3 players. When you come back to knowledge and expertise end of it, I think you're spot on, Paddy. But I think it's the old saying that no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care.
Download the OTB Sports app and subscribe to the GAA podcast feed now.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
13 minutes past 8 this morning. All this week we're giving you the chance to win a Whoop 4.0 digital fitness tracker for you and 2 mates. They come with 12-month memberships, and as the prize winner you'll win $1,000 in cash. Check out OTB social channels to enter. This great Christmas gift is all with thanks to our friends at Whoop. It'll be life-changing for you if you follow the advice for it. Check out whoop.com for more information. 13 minutes past 8. Keith Wood, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning, gents. How are you getting on?
Yeah, very good. A slightly random way to start the show or the conversation with you. Ralph Rangnick has appointed a full-time sports psychologist at Manchester United. The first time they've had one since the year 2001. With Keith Barry on the show yesterday morning, and he was talking about working with Rory Best. I was just interested to see the whole notion of the hooker and the sports psychologist is, because it's a bit like getting the yips in golf. If your ball is drifting off to the left or drifting off to the right, you're screwed, and it's very public. And the psychology of it is almost as important as the mechanics.
I would think so. I think there's a mixture of the two. There is, if you have any mechanical issue and you keep practicing that, they tend to come out under huge pressure. But also there can be a sense of panic in terms of if you're against a really good or very tall defensive line out, and you're effectively threading a needle from about 10 metres. And that's quite interesting. And when you're standing and you're looking at someone who's 6'10", who's going to be lifted to a huge height, and you're trying to throw it over him. And it's why an awful lot of the lineouts have changed, why a lot of the numbers are down, just a couple down to 5 and 6 men, why the lineout caller is now, for the most part, in the centre of the lineout, who's able to see exactly what's going on and who is where and what. And an awful lot of the throws have become a flatter throw. They don't quite have that loop over the top, which I think is needed in certain instances, but they're far sooner now to try and get the ball into the air quickly, off the line out quickly, and to move on. But the psychology of it can be incredibly lonely. You're on the side of a field, you've just run into somebody at 18 or 19 stone, he's smashed you into touch, or you've smashed him into touch, and then you have to calm your mind and get yourself relaxed so that you can function properly. So I think it's an essential part of sport. I went looking for a psychologist for Ireland back in the late 90s, early 2000s. There were not a huge amount involved in sport at that stage. I didn't kind of trust too many of them at that stage either, because you're looking to have a pure sense of trust with the psychologist, that he doesn't destabilize the guys, because you're often looking for a psychologist at a particular moment in time. I think it's ideal if you can have a psychologist that's working with you for 3 or 4 years, because that's the opportunity to really grow, I think.
That's the thing. If you're only looking for somebody in crisis, it might be too late. And at that stage, like, how do you attribute the success or failure of what you're doing? It's like every bit of information, as you're desperately searching for a solution to a problem.
Yeah, but it's almost like a golf psychologist talking to a guy and just telling them to think of entirely different things when they're playing. Well, if they're trying to do that for the weekend, that could be a problem. If they're trying to do that over a period of time, you can build in routines, mental routines, so that under certain points of pressure, you have a place you can get to that gets you out of that pressure. And that's something that can be incredibly essential. I mean, I read every psychology book going in the last few years when I was playing rugby, and have read a huge amount since. But and I wish I'd had it earlier. Actually, I wish I'd got my head around some of the parts of the mental game that were necessary, and like I had done huge components of the psychology that would be used now. I was very keen very early on doing pre-match visualizations and doing it during the week and trying to understand what I would do under certain circumstances. But I was doing it alone, and for the most part. So I think it's part of sport. Sport has, when I started, which was 30 odd years ago, you wouldn't have the scrutiny that you'd have now in terms of your performance on the field. You would be able to get away with a few bad matches, and not everything was put up in lights. Now the players that are playing are, everything is critiqued, and there's no leeway given for them. Well, they're playing, they're in the jersey, they should be great. So if a guy misses a tackle or misses a throw, that's now a problem and a fault for them. So I think whatever support you can get for that is essential.
Yeah, and you've got to be curious and keep trying to improve that. It is kind of bizarre that Manchester United, who is this multi-billion-dollar organisation, haven't already had somebody on the staff full-time whose job it is to help people with this side of the game. It strikes me as one of those kind of things that sport, very anachronistic, very bleeding edge in many respects, but also really stuck in its ways in others.
Yeah, it can be incredibly conservative in how it goes about different things. And also, a lot of the coaches, I'm not saying in Man United, but a lot of coaches are the boss. So they want to be always considered the boss. And by having a psychologist on your staff, you're giving over a huge amount of control to somebody who will have a huge amount of support and control with different players. So that can often be an issue for the boss, who's, and that the guys that are the most confident are the guys who are willing to have smarter people around them. And I think it's it's a good sign for Man United. You know, I'm a Man United fan as well, so it's a good sign for Man United to see that, like, things haven't gone well for them for an awful long time, and they've changed the coaches and they've changed players, but maybe it's about time to try and rebuild the psychology of the club.
We had Ronan Keller on last night talking with Joe as well, and about the experience of going on the lines, and the disappointment of not getting actually on the field was something that came through. And it should be, you know, it should be a kind of thing where you're ambitious, where you reach that point. But equally, I think from the outside, everybody's like, wow, you managed to go from not being in the Ireland team to going on the Lions tour. It is meteoric by any stretch of the imagination or anybody's definition of that. So where's his game at the moment, and how quickly is he progressing?
His game it's not top notch yet, but it is getting there. I'm genuinely excited by the battle between him and Sheahan that we're going to see over the next number of years, and to who else is going to come up and try and challenge them. I think he's grown into his level of confidence where. And I think he's been helped by Andy Farrell as well, and the philosophy that we saw actually in the autumn, where there's a little bit more allowed that isn't regimented. So he's a big, fast ball carrier. He is bristling with the level of controlled aggression, which I think is fantastic for a hooker. But I also think you need to have ball carriers in the different parts of the field, and for too long Ireland have relied on either a number 8 or a 6 or a second row, and maybe a bit with Tadhg Furlong. And now there seems to be an awful lot of players that are able to fulfil the role. That's essential. You need at least one in each row in the pack, 2 if you can get them. And you don't want, you don't mind having 3 or filling them all out, that they're all good ball carriers, provided other people remember that they have to win the ball and win the ruck. So I just think he looks better. His throwing looks more accurate. He's got a really tight spiral on the throw. As I alluded to earlier on, I do think he could do a bit of a variation for an arced throw. I think that would actually put him into a much better position, a higher sense of confidence if he could do that over time, which he will over time because he's very young. But look, I'm excited by him, and I'm excited by Sheahan.
That arc throw that you mentioned there, Keith, is that something that every hooker goes through, trying to develop that? Is that always kind of the final part of the jigsaw?
Look, you develop different throws over time, and it's incredibly reflective on how the laws are being reffed, and on what coaches do when there's a change in the law from different times, and that's how the changes happen. So if I put it back for a long time ago, they had no lifting in the line out, then partial lifting in the line out, then lifting after the ball was thrown, which was an unbelievable farce and a joke. To not being able to lift too early. So at different times it was essential to have that arc. But as I said, the game has changed a lot at the moment, that if you can get up early enough, quickly enough now, and you're ahead, if the jumper gets ahead of their jumper, well then that fast ball is essential, because if they put one hand on the jumper's hand, it's a penalty. And that wasn't the case. So that faster throw is phenomenal. But it's just to have the other one in your locker that you need at times. When I started, I had Brent Anderson, a New Zealand player playing with Ger Eoin, and he was a 2 jumper with no lifting, and he had 4 different jumps. So he wanted 4 different throws, which was extraordinary at the time, because before it was forward and back, it was as simple, but he had different subtleties that he wanted to be able to build it in, because that's what you needed, because there was no lifting in the line out. So as the laws change, the throws have to change as well, but it's good to have different things in your locker.
The battle isn't just with Sheahan though, is it? Like, at the moment, Herring has been a bit of I wouldn't say revelation, but he's been a rock solid international quality hooker for Ireland since Andy Farrell's put him in there on a regular basis.
Well, I think he was in the shadow of Rory Best for a long time. I do think he is very consistent. The difference I would have between Herring and the two Leinster guys, and any of the other players at the moment, is that the Leinster guys offer an awful lot more than the core elements of hooker, and I think that's where Ireland need to progress. I think at times we are and have been a little bit conservative in that. You're looking for a level of consistent kind of perfection, but I'd like a little bit more brio and more capability around the field for the very simple reason. If you get blocked down and if you need players that are, I don't know, physically or mentally capable of taking risks, we need to be able to take certain risks because we want to push it further. It all depends whether our target is to be a conservative team. But I think if we look at what nearly every rugby fan would say is that they're disappointed by how Ireland perform when it gets to a World Cup. And at our last World Cup, we were found out in the game plan that we had was blocked down. So what you're looking for is a sense of independent thought and independent capability of the players. And it's how do you mould that into a team that can change at half time. That's, something I think we've always been lacking. And I just think, for me, if I'm looking at the future and I'm saying I want to have people who think differently, I'm looking at Kelleher and Sheahan. That's harsh on Herring, but because Herring plays really well. And that's what I said before the autumn internationals. I'm very happy to have Herring there as a just in case, because you know that he's going to turn up, go into the green jersey and do a cracking job, because he will. But does he have a ceiling that the others don't have? And in my view, the others have a higher ceiling. Actually, they have a higher capability and an opportunity to be different. I mean, for me, I look at Dan Sheahan, who was kind of had a bit of puppy fat on him last year. Now he's much leaner, but he'll get much bigger over the next 2 or 3 years. He's going to be an absolute beast of a guy. So, you want those, we often talk about this, but you want those players to try and get the experience by the time a World Cup comes around, as opposed to holding on to guys to the end. So you can do that with some, but not with all. And for me, when you have viable options like the two guys, I'd be going with those two guys.
So your depth chart then would actually be the Leinster depth chart at the moment. It's Kelleher first, Sheahan second, and Herring is third.
Yes, that's exactly how we look at it. Now, I have a lot of time for Herring because he plays very well. But I mean, what we're trying to say is, would Herring could he be a world-class player? I think he's a very, very good international, but I don't think he has that opportunity. I actually do see that in both Kelleher and Sheahan. And I know that's very early to say that for both of them, and the only way you'll ever get to see it is if they're playing enough of international matches.
Okay. Look, I think that's interesting, and I think that we either decide that we want to be safe and maybe make a quarter-final and see how it goes, or let's put our chips in the middle and see what happens. And that's where the evolution and the developing the young players and getting them up to speed as fast as possible gives you that opportunity. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on at Munster. Obviously, a slew of young players have now been registered for the European competition at the weekend. I don't remember a build-up like this, but we have seen that there has already been a 28-0 concession this weekend. Munster are going to avoid that, we believe, at this stage, which gives them an opportunity. And to be honest, the history of Munster teaches you that if you give them an opportunity and you make them massive underdogs, well, then good things can happen. Are we expecting too much to expect something good to happen for Munster this weekend?
I don't think so, actually. And I think there's a lot of a history that will show you that miracles can happen with Munster. But I think you'll have a pretty interesting team. There's a lot of internationals in that team. There's a lot of guys that were already left at home to rest. There's guys coming back from injury. You put in some young guys with it. I think you stack the bench with players that come out of their isolation on that morning. That's what I think they'll do. They may not do it, but I think they might do it. I don't think Munster will be in such a bad position. They're playing against a Wasps team who who've been very hot and cold this year. I mean, they do score, they get a lot of bonus points, but they haven't won a lot of matches. So it's different against a big powerhouse team, to be honest. And I think they would really like to make certain they got their season back on track, but I think they'd be more interested in the Premiership. But look, I think Munster have to look at it and say it's a mess. But so many things built around COVID have been a mess. So, I mean, I still think you have to query the idea of travelling to the other side of the world. I think for competitions in general, and mind for the URC at the moment. But look, I think Munster will put a good team onto the field. I think Ian Costello will do a good job. He knows Wasps very well. He knows Munster very well, even though he's only back into the Munster setup this year. So he has been able to coach. And you know that these are the sort of circumstances that bring Munster together. And there's lots of different conversation going from off the field. There was query whether Van Gran would be going to Bath, that there was whether they were showing an interest in him, which would put Munster in a real state of flux, having lost Stephen Larkham. So with that level of bitchiness in the background, I would expect Munster to go out and play well. And I actually think they have a reasonable chance of winning. And I know that sounds ludicrous, but there's a lot of players that are at home that are of serious quality. Can they be the rallying call to get the best out of some of the young guys that are needed? So the wish is that the young guys are good enough to be able to take the level of contact and the pressure in the scrums. That's the thing that's important, and nobody gets injured. So that's part of the consideration that Munster have to have a look at.
That level of flux in the background is really interesting, Keith. How much are you reading into the Van Gran links yourself at the moment?
Sorry, say that again?
How much are you reading into the potential links of Van Gran away from Munster at the end of the season?
Well, I'm looking at that as, I'm a comfortable cynic on most things. So I think that would be a particularly good ploy to have for any negotiation. And he's in the midst of a negotiation for his contract. So that's the thing that pretty much every player or coach should be doing anyway. And I don't even know if that's true or not. So, and if it's not, because everybody is looking for coaches, Bath are having a shocking season. They've lost 9 out of 9, and they have nearly the most money in the league, and yet behind them in the league, and yet they're falling apart. So there could be an opportunity there, and we've seen it with Pat Lam going to Bristol before. Sometimes a contract can be just too good to pass on. I don't know. And look, I was very upset with Larkham going, because I don't think we got to see the best of him. And so I think Munster would have to deal with it one way or the other. So if I'm at the stage where Munster will, if Van Gran goes, Munster have an opportunity to change their style of play. So for that, no, there's a huge flux if that happens, and that makes it very, very difficult. But if he stays, whether Munster continue to change with it or not, or they stick to that, becomes a big question, because I do feel that Munster need to embrace a faster game than they're presently playing. So I don't know.
Can I come in on that? Because it doesn't really feel like there would be a huge change required in personnel for them to embrace the way the game has gone, and it feels like they're trapped a little bit in the with the South African influence, obviously with Van Gran and his background, and a bit of Munster's gene pool as well would have been not entirely dissimilar. But then Larkham comes in, and you can see that they're trying to do something, but it feels like there's a tension there, that they're a little bit pregnant, and we know that doesn't work. So, like, would a new coach coming in be the worst thing in the world? I'm not sure.
No, I don't know. I'm 50-50 on it, and I like Van Gran, and I'd like to see the game progress a little. I mean, I struggle when I see us slow it down and suddenly go for box kicks. I think that was a great tactic in its time, but I don't think it's such a good tactic at the moment, and I don't think it suits Munster. And actually, I don't think the South African way suits Munster, because they're not a big enough team for it. You need to have huge forwards to be able to consistently play in that fashion, and Munster don't have those players. So, look, I don't know whether there's a resistance to change or whether change is taking a period of time. So if I look at Andy Farrell taking over from Joe Schmidt after 2019, that's 2 years that change has taken, and we were frustrated for that for sort of 20 months of the 2 years, and we've only been happy with the progress, really happy, I think, in the last few months, because suddenly you could see what it is that they were trying to do. But for a period of time we were saying, well, we don't know what they're trying to do. But I do think there's been a liberation almost in some of the shackles. There's an opportunity to take risk in Munster. Some of the younger players seem to take that opportunity in Munster, but I think there's a default setting that is it's either being coached or it's just taking longer to coach out. So I don't know.
Well, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens, and this weekend is an opportunity for us to, again, the full information has never quite been there because of COVID. When Larkham arrived, very soon afterwards, COVID happened, and he never fully got the opportunity to work properly with Joey Carberry, fully fit. And it would have been really great to see what the influence would have been and what the style of play might have been. And again, even at the weekend, like, it's a big European game away from home, but it's not the full team. So the picture is partial, and that's sport. Like, you know, you've got to be able to build your architecture around partial pictures.
Well, there's luck involved in sport as well, luck and circumstance. And there has been very strange circumstances for the last couple of years. The way the competition has been shortened again over the last couple of years makes it incredibly hard to get out of your group. You need to pretty much not slip up at all. And that's a very tough place to be. And when you have a history in Munster, which is of progressing and getting to semi-finals, finals and winning, and people say they haven't won for quite a while. They haven't, but they have been, they're consistently last four and have, you know, for huge amounts of their history. For things like that not to happen because of circumstance can make life incredibly hard. But that is the nature of sport. Nobody says it's particularly fair. No. And I mean, it's funny. I'm excited by this weekend. I'm looking at matches that the Irish players are playing, but I'm also looking at Bordeaux against Leicester, and looking at you know, teams that haven't been at the top table for a while and now are again, which is quite something. Yeah. So it's a great competition. It's a cracking competition.
It is, and it's live this weekend on Off the Ball as well. Keith, great stuff. Great to have you with us. Thanks a million.
Brilliant. Cheers, boys.
Munster against Wasps is our live game this weekend. Kicks off at 3:15 in the Champions Cup with, that's going to be pretty interesting. That is on Sunday on Off the Ball on News Talk. It's 8:38. In the papers this morning, one of Ralph Rangnick's first moves at Manchester United has been to hire a sports psychologist. Bill Bezic joined Stuart Lancaster on season 1 of Leaders' Questions here on OTB. He was the last full-time sports psychologist employed at the club way back around the 99 season. Here he is talking about working with the likes of Roy Keane.
Well, a story I can share with you, and I think my friend Steve McLaren wouldn't mind. I've heard him talk about this publicly. But he came from Derby County to Manchester United in the space of 3 days. His life was turned upside down. He was the assistant manager of Manchester United. So for his first day's training, he decided that he would take a fun approach and get to know them and make it a little bit more social. So he did team relays and team competitions to try and bed himself in. And partway through this, Roy, who'd lost a competition and was made to do press-ups, walked off the field. He did say something, but I'm not going to repeat it, yeah. He walked off the field and went home. And when I got back from Derby County that evening, Steve was on the phone to me and explained to me he was really devastated. His captain had walked off the field in the first day of training. And I said, you've got to ring Roy. And that was like asking somebody to catch a hand grenade. I said, you've got to ring Roy. One principle of coaching is never let today's problem roll into tomorrow. It gets worse. Deal with it now. He rang Roy And 2 hours later, he rang me and said, I've just had a masterclass in coaching. The only thing that Roy is interested in is hard work and challenge, because that's what prepares him to go out in front of 75,000 people and television cameras on a Saturday. If he's not worked hard during the week, he doesn't feel ready for the performance on a Saturday. And I'd taken one of those training sessions that he needs so badly and abused it by doing things that weren't relevant to the game. That was Roy. He was very honest, very tough-minded, but actually very intelligent and perceptive about what top players needed.
Right, that was Bill Bezic on Leaders' Questions with Stuart Lancaster. You can listen back to the full 2 seasons of Leaders' Questions with Stuart Lancaster. Some brilliant guests like that, and that's available to download on the OTB Sports app. John Duggan is with us. John?
Ger, how are you doing? And Owen. And interestingly, off the back of that piece there with Bill Bezic, we have the Ralph Rangnick press conference segment on OTB AM, and this day's segment is about his new guru for the mind, Sasha Lenze.
We have decided to bring in a sport psychologist with Sasha Lenze. For me, it's only a question of logic. I mean, if you have special coaches for goalkeeping, for physical education, for even for strikers, for whatever, for fitness, you also should have an expert for the brain, and not so much to put them on the red sofa and holding hands for the players, because most of them won't do that anyway. And for me, it's about helping the players that the brain should assist the body and not work against it, you know. So this is what it's about, that the players and even the coaching staff, everybody in our team should think in the right way.
Not so much the red sofa and the holding hands. He's got a very old school Freud. Come and sit and tell me about your mother and father and how you're obsessed with sex. It's mad to me that, as I said this earlier, multi-billion pound, euro, dollar organisations are like, what's this thing over here? We're suspicious of that. We don't need any of this. We don't need to help the players improve visualisation or thinking about things. That's not important.
I wonder what the social media gurus are going to think. Remember, there's a social media guy that got ridiculed about a month ago. I wonder is he still on the payroll, and is he now going to have Instagram tutorials on Ralph's mind work and all this kind of thing?
I mean, yeah, and it'll be sponsored by like
Chevrolet,
somebody, a new sponsor.
It does feel like that clip that you played there, John. It feels like a clip from 2005.
Yeah, it's mad, isn't it?
It's so like, is this?
But it feels very sophisticated after all.
Well, yes, it does, which is such an indictment, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like,
when Man United go out and play, express yourselves.
Like a 1980s manager, Solskjaer, in retrospect. But, like, still, I presume all the other Premier League clubs have, working with their young players, do they not? Like, massive amounts of money sloshing around. One of those players who comes up with Jerry Flannery on the last Cadbury Roadshow, and Alex Iwobi was one of the players who was at Arsenal who ended up getting transferred to Everton for
and it's not worked out at Everton
50 million quid, right?
Yeah.
If you can just convince 2 or 3 of the youngsters to come through to be good enough to play in the Premier League, the value of those becomes 5 million, 10 million, 15, 20, 50 million quid. Hire a sports psychologist to make sure that they are performing every day in training.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Is it a case like that? I just find it so outlandish that Manchester United haven't had full-time sports psychologists in 20 years. Is it a case that actually they are investing when it comes to academies, when it comes to some of the younger players, maybe on an individual basis? These players all have their own personal coaches, or is that just the reality here rather than one overall team psychologist? Has football actually moved to that point already? And like, this doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't. It doesn't.
That this is that they haven't had one for 20 years.
I go back to the point I made about Dean Smith kind of being very reluctant to say that he uses technical information. I'm a bit of a stats nerd, me, like a self-deprecating. It's like, I take all of the available information. Every single point of available information I use, because I'm not stupid.
Well, Big Sam was at the forefront of all that technical information 15 years ago.
In fairness to
Bolton.
In fairness to him, he certainly did tell us about using that.
I do think the Ferguson project was so unique at United. I do think it had papered over a lot of cracks at the club. under the Glazers for the last 15 years.
It's interesting that he was happy for Steve McLaren to bring in somebody, and Keane adopted it, and so therefore it was accepted. But then I don't know when Bezic left with McLaren leaving, or like what that bit was like.
Yeah, well, Ferguson always had they always had good coaches. Like Kirosh followed, and the players a lot of the time can manage this themselves. And Ferguson himself was almost the mind guru. There was always a story about the Chilean miners came to see Man United. Rio Ferdinand was doing an interview about it, and they went and the Chilean miners did a talk on the Thursday, and they were all like just blown away by it. And on the Saturday or the Sunday, Ferguson walks in the dressing room and just says nothing, because they all just know the Chilean miners.
Yeah.
So all these kind of tricks of the trade and stuff. So a lot of it might be based from the top down, but yeah, I don't know the intricacies of, say, West Ham or Brighton or Aston Villa. Does Steven Gerrard now have psychologists for players? Because obviously they should. And we've seen with Irish rugby recently, Gary Keegan, I believe, is involved there.
He is now, but like in fairness, Enda McNulty's been involved like 2 decades at this stage.
Yeah.
15 years anyway, all the way back. He talked about the Mind Gym at Leinster. That's where that started. I'm pretty sure he was still playing when he was involved.
But they're saying that Gary Keegan is making a real tangible. I remember Caroline Curd in Limerick as well. Even back to, was it the mid-90s, was Niamh Fitzpatrick, was it, at Wexford in 1996?
Yeah.
With Wexford Hurling and Liam Griffin.
We expect to see like a massive upturn now from the Cork Hurlers obviously next year when they've got Gary Keegan in tow. Like it's really interesting when you talk about Ferguson there. I wonder is part of the reason for us being surprised that the sports psychologists haven't had a bigger role in the club. Is it just to do with power? And what Keith Wood said there a moment ago, that they are in an incredibly privileged position. The amount of time that they get to spend one-on-one with the players, is that something that perhaps would rub somebody like Alex Ferguson up the wrong way? I'm not sure. I'm just speculating here, but it was quite telling. Even like in the day before the All Blacks game in the 2019 World Cup, you would see Irish players doing their one-to-one sessions with Enda McNulty, and like he's got an incredibly powerful place to be the last person to have. One of the last people to have a meaningful conversation with that player before going out and playing one of the biggest games of their lives. That I wonder, is there not a reasonable scepticism, but you can almost see where managers have been coming from to be hesitant about psychologists in the past, that they would say to themselves, right, I want to be in control of my players' minds.
Yeah, it's insecurity.
Not some scientist who comes out, yeah.
I think it depends on the group that you have. Do Spurs need one under Antonio Conte? Probably not at the moment, as much as they would have needed one under Jose, because Jose walk in the dressing room and there's just silence when you watch the Amazon documentary. I think it depends on the environment and the place and where the team is at, where the squad is at, how much they need and how strong the personalities are. When I look at France, the World Cup in that documentary, I don't think they needed a psychologist, because the players are also intensely bought into themselves.
I buy the point that Ranić makes. We have throw-in coaches.
Yeah.
Just all you need is somebody. Do you have a mindset coach? You should get a mindset coach.
Yeah.
Everybody should have a little bit of a sounding board and
no stone left unturned.
A performance analyst, like a Bernard Dunn figure for the Dublin footballers. Any of that kind of stuff. So what else is going on, John?
Well, we got Man United playing Young Boys, Chelsea playing Zenit tonight. Last night, Pep Guardiola not happy with Kyle Walker after he got sent off for a stupid kick in that 2-1 defeat at RB Leipzig, out for the first leg of the last 16 game. Liverpool 100% record in the group stage of the Champions League. Symbolic that they beat AC Milan 2-1 with 8 changes from the Wolves game. Like, think back to 2005. It really is showing where English football is compared to Italian football at the moment. AC Milan didn't even get a place in the Europa League. We've got Munster having 22 players called up for their game against Wasps, which you have here on Off the Ball and News Talk. Peter Mahoney, Tyg Byrne, Conor Murray, Joey Carberry and Andrew Conway available. I thought it was disgraceful that the Scarlets got done 28-0 on a forfeit, having to quarantine outside Belfast, and the Bristol Bears, like, just for the sake of the schedule in a 100-year pandemic. I just think it's really, really short-sighted stuff from the organisers of the competition. They could have found a different way. Like, Tottenham are playing Brighton on Sunday. They got 7 players who got COVID. They're going to reschedule the game. The Premier League are deciding everything on a case-by-case basis.
I think with them, they actually laid out every single weekend is booked now, because they could have played it during the Six Nations.
Maybe
play
midweek.
I don't know what the crack is with the absence of midweek games in professional rugby. Like, it never happens. You never see it. So I don't know what the story.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe
I just think it's very inflexible. I just find that thing very, very inflexible. And the Ashes have started today, lads. I don't know if you're bought into this at all, or if you like this thing at all.
I think as a sport, when when it's played between two teams who are at the very high level, you've got to commit 5 days to it to watch it properly, right? That's
you need to have a lot of time.
No longer part of my life.
When you're 13 or 14 years of age and you've got nothing to do in the summer.
The bullshit around the Ashes, no thanks. The months and months and months and months and months and months of build up, and also, correct me if I'm wrong, but
don't read the Telegraph this week. Then
England barely win this thing, right?
They didn't win it for 16 years between 89 and 05. They've won 5 of the last 9, including 05.
Okay, so it's a rivalry now.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, but there's the Jerusalem and the there is a lot of nonsense around it. But England got bowled out for 147 runs today. I was just thinking to myself, sporting experiences, lads. I don't know if you've ever been to the cricket. It's good fun. It's went to the Ireland, Pakistan and Malahide, because you can watch a bit of the cricket and then you get bored of it and then you go off for something to eat and then you go for a few beers and then you go back and watch a bit more of the cricket.
It sounds perfect.
Yeah, it is good. It's a bit like baseball in that kind of environment, Owen. And I remember going to see England play West Indies at Trent Bridge when I was 17 in Nottingham. I stayed in Derby overnight in a ramshackle B&B, and we had to wake up the B&B owner to get us breakfast before we went off to Nottingham, and then watch the game in the heat in Nottingham. I wasn't drinking at the time; I was too young. But everybody kind of gets bored after about a couple of hours, and the Barmy Army, there was a lad going for beers in the crowd, and he would go down for the beers, and we'd bring him back the tray of beers. Everybody would be, yeah, for your man just bringing down the tray. And then he'd go back down for the tray of beers, and everybody's like, so that's the kind of way it goes. It's an attention span thing. People get really into it when it's exciting, and then they move out of it. I'd say baseball's not too dissimilar.
American football is great as well. I was at a Philadelphia Eagles game, and the Philadelphia Eagles fans are some of the worst fans in football, but they're brilliant. Because there's no other fans there. There's one other guy who was getting a lot of grief, but they were their team lost, and they were bellicose. You can drink the whole way through, and the drinks will come to your. They will.
Guys coming around with the.
Yeah, like
plastic cups
until like this
after tailgating
the last
as well?
quarter. Yeah, the fourth quarter you can't drink, but the rest of the game, so the atmosphere gets more and more and more head up. And
what are American workplaces like on Monday mornings?
I'd say absentee levels are very high in the major sports.
Oh, and how drunk were those people in where you were?
A few weeks ago at the college game, they were pretty well honest, to be honest with you. But
maybe maybe they pace themselves. To be fair,
college games are Saturdays. That's a weird.
Okay.
True.
Yeah,
but you can't really, as far as I'm aware, there were
no drink in the stadium.
That's it, yeah, because it's college. But at professional, you can. Like for me, it's the baseball and the football are the two that are conducive. With the basketball, it's a little bit too heavy going. Except if you go to Boston, they still find a way of getting absolutely leathered throughout the game. We're all describing a situation here which is nothing in comparison to, say, the Principality Stadium for a casual November test, of course. That is the true market leader of how to get leathered in a day watching sport.
Well, I think about basketball is you can have a great time in basketball because I've always said to you, Owen, the only thing that matters in basketball is the last 5 minutes.
Yeah.
If you
when the scores are the same.
John, good stuff.
All right, lads.
Thanks a million. More from John on Saturday afternoon on Off the Ball on News Talk. We have been asking you on the poll who you think is going to be the next Champions League winner. Liverpool runaway favourites there, 58%. Bayern Munich on 20%. Real Madrid on 6%. And we have others on 16%. PSG, we've seen it in the Ronaldo Madrid years, probably weren't the best teams, says John Claffey, but had outstanding match winners. Shane says maybe Mbappe isn't as good as we think. His attitude stinks. Rizzle Kicks and Damien both say Manchester United will win the UEFA Champions League. Graham Mouser says the question is, what comedic process will Man City employ to blow any chance of winning the Champions League? I don't know about Haaland or the BL, says Asneers32, but how many stars arrive in the Premier League from the BL and live up to their billing, the Bundesliga? I don't know. I think some have definitely made the move and been absolutely sensational. So we will wait and see on that one. It's 8:54 this morning. You're watching OTB AM. We're live with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. Now we want to move on, and I'm delighted to say our next guest is standing by. His name is Wesley O'Brien from Hit and Hope Tennis. He's an Irish tennis coach who has delivered tennis sessions, equipment and defibrillators to people living in refugee camps in Greece since 2018 in conjunction with a local charity called Lighthouse Relief. Wesley, good morning to you. How are you?
Hi, good morning, Tommy. How are you keeping?
It's Ger Eoin here, actually. You've got a raffle going on to raise funds for what you're doing at the moment. Maybe tell us a little bit about the prizes you have, and then you can tell us where the money's going to go, because the prize list here is fairly sensational.
Yeah, it started a number of years ago when I first went out to Greece. I decided to contact a couple of the NGOs in Greece. I suppose it was due to the job that I do here in Killaloe. I work a lot with young kids, and I kind of felt I would love to do something out in the refugee camps and with those kind of communities. So I've been out to Rizzona refugee camp on 3 occasions. And I set up a different program with another NGO in Greece as well. But the idea of the fundraising and the sports memorabilia was in my most recent trip to Rizzona. I asked one of the managers in the camp if they actually had a defibrillator in the camp. And they kind of said that in a refugee camp, something like that would be a luxury, so they wouldn't actually have one. So I just decided to come home and say, look, I'll try and raise a bit of money for you guys to have a defibrillator. So it kind of all grew out of that. I reached out to like a number of different sports personalities to see who could, help me out with this, and the response was like amazing. It was like totally incredible. I got some amazing items from Usain Bolt, from Lewis Hamilton, Rory McIlroy, Rafa Nadal, and Franz Beckenbauer. Those are the 5 that I'm going to be, that we are going to be raffling off to raise some money, and some of the proceeds will be going to my own work out in the refugee camps and buying tennis equipment and tennis balls and tennis nets and hopefully some more defibrillators. And it's going to be shared with a good friend of mine called Alwyn O'Toole, who runs the Access Tennis Foundation here in Ireland. And what Alwyn does is Alwyn would bring tennis to kind of communities, disadvantaged, underprivileged communities here in Ireland. So we kind of felt that, what I do abroad, Alwyn would do here in Ireland. So we kind of link in well with each other. So
Wesley, how did you end up going to Greece the first time?
It kind of came like a number of years. It was kind of a combination of, like I said, the work I do here in the club. I work a lot with young kids and summer camps and coaching and schools. But I suppose the idea really came out of a number of years ago. I saw, I suppose, a very famous photograph now of a young boy called Alan Curdy, who was 3 years old, and he washed up on the beach in Turkey. His family were trying to cross over from Turkey into Greece. He was a young Syrian boy, and unfortunately, like, the boat kind of capsized, and it was a very upsetting picture for me anyway. I suppose it was for like a lot of people. And I suppose it was really from that moment on I kind of felt, if I could do something, not much, but like something for those kids or something for those kind of communities, I would really love to do something. And I suppose tennis was kind of the obvious choice, because I am a tennis coach. So I just kind of reached out to a couple of NGOs, and one NGO came back called Lighthouse Relief, who was based in Rizzona refugee camp in northern Greece. And I just put the idea to them, look, I'm a coach here from Ireland, would you guys be interested in me getting as many rackets as I can, as many tennis balls as I can, and just kind of going down and running a bit of a summer camp or a winter camp for a week. And I suppose it was a bit nervous for both of us because it had never really been done before. But we worked out initially that, my first trip, I travelled down in November 2018 with all the rackets and all the balls to the refugee camp. And I spent a week just teaching the kids tennis and just having a bit of fun with them. And it was just like the most amazing experience ever. As far as I was concerned, it was, I always tell people that I'm glad I went for a week, but I'm sorry I went for a week. I'm glad I went in the sense of I got to do it, but I was sorry that it was only for a week, because I really felt myself having a bit of a connection, and the kids just were so amazing. They loved it. But I've been lucky now to be back to with Ronan on 3 different occasions. And like I said, with COVID, I didn't get out for a long time, but I was lucky enough to get back to Greece to another NGO to start a second program with Strong Gens in Athens just this last September.
So what's Strong Gens? Strong
Gens is a school that's based in Athens for young Afghan refugees. And it was through the club here that I linked in with a gentleman called Ger Eoin, who's a teacher from Carlow. He's a primary school teacher. And like Gary would go over and back to kind of Greece as well, to Strong Gens, and do a bit of teaching with them, English and that kind of a thing. It's supposed to, it kind of symbolises, Strong Gens as in like a stronger generation, I suppose, yeah.
Okay. And Wesley, for you, obviously, you said the response was tennis. It was obvious from your perspective. I suppose a lot of people are listening going, that's a kind of a wild enough idea, but it obviously was something that you thought would have an impact. Do you know what kind of impact it had? Like, and when you get there, what's the experience of being in the refugee camp for that week actually like? What did you see?
It's amazing. Like initially, like the first time I went over, like just initially for the week, like you don't really know what to expect. I suppose, like the managers and the NGOs that are over there, like one of the ladies that's actually working over there full time is a lady called Claire Camping, who's from Kilkenny. So she would have told me, look, this is what you do, this is what you don't do. But like in relation to the kids, I just kind of went in, I always tell people I kind of went into kind of kid mode, It wasn't really, oh, you're different to the kids back home or anything like that. It was, let's have some fun, let's get out, the kids just, it was a brand new experience for them, as well as for the youth as well. And we had some ladies and girls playing tennis as well, which was, in that kind of culture is kind of unheard of. You don't ask questions. I found a couple, as they kind of get to know you, some of the residents would kind of open up to you, but you'd never be in a situation where you'd say, oh, where are you from? What happened to you? How did you get here? I would never ask those questions unless someone wanted to kind of tell me those questions.
I guess as somebody who is, the sport is your life in terms of your livelihood and all that kind of stuff, you have a belief that sport can help in scenarios like this. No one is suggesting that it's going to be a silver bullet to solve any of the world's problems, but as a distraction, as a social glue, talk to us a little bit about your own kind of belief in sport, and was it strengthened or weakened as you kind of embarked on this process?
I feel it was 100% strengthened. Like you said yourself, what I'm doing over the, it's not going to change anyone's life. It's not going to, take away from what happened to them or make anything better. But, a big part of it is, if some of the residents here are lucky enough to get placed in a certain country, be it Germany or France or anything like that, and they go into a community and it's a tennis club, and they get invited into the club and, I played a bit of tennis and I was, where I was, we played a bit of tennis. And it's a great way of kind of meeting friends and meeting, kind of welcoming people into a new community. For anyone, it's the same as to be said for anyone in Ireland. If someone is moving from one part of the country to another part of the country, if they play tennis in Donegal and they're moving to Clare and they join a club, it's a great way to kind of get involved with that. There's one story that kind of sticks out in my mind. The very first trip I was there, we had done tennis on pretty much all day, and it was near the end of the day, and we were picking up the nets and picking up the cones and all that. And there was one little boy. He came across from the residential area, so where a lot of the residents would live, and he was the most gorgeous kid you'll ever see in your life. He was like this blonde-haired, blue-eyed kid. And without me even asking him, he was going around and he was picking up all the little cones for me and bringing them over to me. It's hard to get some of the kids in Ireland here to come and do that. But he went around and he picked up all the cones and he gave it to me, and there was no one else around. So I just gave the little boy, one of the tennis rackets, and I said, go over there now, we'll have a bit of a hit. And the big smile came on his face, like he loved a bit of attention, and he loved, that kind of a thing. And then two people walked over from the residential area, which was his parents, and they took out a bit of a phone and they were filming him and all that. And I just said, is that your little boy? And they, in kind of broken English, they would have said, yeah. And I just told them how, that I wanted them to know that you have one very good little boy there, that he came around and he helped me pick up the cones, and I didn't even ask him, and he's a very, very good boy. And I could see them getting a bit, I suppose kind of emotional a little bit. I suppose it was nice to kind of hear that from someone, kind of a stranger, I suppose, because it's very much an uncertain time. They don't know what's going to happen, in their future, but, most parents in that environment, they care about the kids. So, little things like that, and, I always make sure that wherever I go with these trips, that, all the equipment, all the tennis rackets, all the nets are left with them so that they can keep it going without me.
When will you get to go back, Wesley, do you think?
Yeah, the plan is, I'm hoping, I've been lucky enough to be out now 4 times to 2 different camps, so I'm hoping in March time next year now I'll get out to hopefully Turkey. There's a lovely NGO in Turkey that it's a centre called KEP Team, and that they run a centre in Izmir in Turkey for refugee women and girls. So it's not like there's no males, it's kind of a safe house for kind of refugee women and girls. So I'm hoping March time now will be my next trip, please God.
If anybody wants to buy a raffle ticket, how do they get involved? So it's a signed shirt from Rafa Nadal, it's a signed flag from Rory McIlroy, it's a Lewis Hamilton and team signed Formula One Mercedes Petronas print, signed European Super Cup Bayern versus Chelsea jersey by Franz Beckenbauer, and a Usain Bolt signed shirt. They're the raffle prizes. Anything, if anybody is interested in helping you, what's the best way to get involved?
Yeah, they have, I have my own Facebook page called Hit and Hope Tennis Coach, so people can check out my own work there. All the items that we have, they've been framed up, beautifully, and they have COAs, and, tickets can be bought either on my own Facebook, tickets can be bought through my own Facebook page, Hit and Hope Tennis Coach on Facebook, or they can be bought through the accesstennisfoundation.ie.
Okay.
So ACCESS tennisfoundation.ie, and just click on the raffle page. Okay. And hopefully people can help.
Wesley, good stuff. Thanks a million for joining us this morning. Cheers and best of luck.
Very good, guys. Thanks very much for having me on. Thank you.
9:08 here this morning on OTB AM. If you want to get involved, you can get us on 0879 180 180. We're brought to you by Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. Here's what's coming up on OTB Sports Radio this morning. OTB Gold from 1 o'clock is our Sonia O'Sullivan interview. The Koi Gig pod is live from 3 o'clock. Tyrone GAA's Golden Days, when they were obviously the team of the decade, is live from 4 o'clock. And OTB Gold is Manu Petit from 6. You're obviously maturing there, Owen. You didn't respond.
Sorry there, Ger. Just literally had to hop and answer the door there. Literally go for that again. You
missed it. Our retro panel at 4 o'clock today is Tyrone's glory days when they were the team of the decade.
So hold on a minute here now. This is team of the decade actually put into the graphic today for OTB Sports Radio, because I would take a massive issue with that.
Missed an opportunity. 9 minutes past 9. We're going to take a quick break. We're back talking boxing with Ronan Mullen next.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
Are we allowed to enjoy this?
Munster legends Alan Quinlan and Niamh Briggs are joining forces to bring you all the latest analysis, news, interviews and so much more.
You stand back and you watch, you can see why these guys are top internationals.
Has he lost the plot here? Or is it just all good fun? I think it's good fun.
The Red 78 with Alan Quinlan and Niamh Briggs. Available every Wednesday. Don't miss a moment of action. Subscribe to the Rugby channel on the OTB Sports app and turn on your notifications now.
It was all Chelsea. Chelsea were so well prepared. They were so well drilled every single time. Like, they kept switching up their formation. They had every single individual player was amazing. I mean, Erin Cuthbert, she was on Katie and also on Beth Mead at various different points. The only time actually that Arsenal had any success was when they swapped those two around for a little bit, but she was incredible. Chelsea should have had about 4 goals in the first half if it wasn't for Zinsberger and for the post. There was one point where she punched the post, and I was like, don't do that. That is your best defense right now, is that post.
Yeah, that's so unusual to be saying, because we've watched a lot of Arsenal this season and they don't cough up chances easily. So yeah, we say that obviously Chelsea played massively well, and they've obviously got, we'll say, the best coach. We're looking at it now. Like, if she was able to master plan this kind of game, that's huge for her and for the team and going forward what they'll have. But yeah, obviously there was a little bit on the nervy side, or something didn't quite click for Arsenal on the day as well, because we don't see them concede that many goals.
No, we don't. And the other thing as well, the one thing I have thought about Arsenal this season is that it does sometimes take them a bit of time to build into a game, to kind of settle into it. And definitely at the start of the second half, obviously Sam Kerr got that goal about 10 minutes into the second half, but up until that point they were actually looking a lot more confident on the ball. They weren't, taking random shots. They really struggled to even get past midfield in the first half. And I remember there was one point where Miedema had the ball and she just did this completely random shot that ricocheted off the defence and didn't go anywhere. But it was so unlike her not to try and attack and take on the team. And Chelsea's press was incredible. But at the same time, they weren't doing that thing that Arsenal have been better at doing this year, which is holding the ball, working it out, trying to get players like Mead or whoever it is into good positions.
Car insurance is boring, but you don't have to be. Get Set Go is the kind of car insurance you can sort in a few minutes online, then bounce on with your day. Are you ready for Quick Start Insurance? Get a quote now at getsetgo.ie. MCL Insurance Services Ireland Limited, trading as getsetgo.ie, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
12 minutes past 9 here this morning on OTB AM. If you've just joined us, we'd love to hear from you. 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number, and you can always get us on the YouTube stream as well. In the ad break there, Leanne Kiernan on the latest episode of the Koi Gig Pod. She is the guest this week, but you would have heard Karen in conversation with Kathleen there. The Koi Gig Pod on OTB Sports is brought to you in association with Cadbury FC, official snack partner to the women's national team. It's great stuff every week, keeping you up to date with how the Irish are getting on in the WSL and any of the issues around the Ireland women's national team at the moment, and our hopes for the future as well, if you want to get in touch with it. Right, let's move on. Ahead of the Champions Cup this weekend, Owen has caught up with Rob Baxter, Ellis Genge, John O'Gibbs, Leo Cullen, Mark McCall and Ronan O'Gara, and asked them all which rule they would change, if any, in rugby.
Stop changing the laws. The biggest rule I would change is stop changing, and they're laws, not rules. Come on, you know that. That would be, so the biggest law I would change is stop changing the law. It's the biggest frustration. It's the biggest frustration to me that every reaction we have as a sport is to try and change the laws to try and make it this game that so many people say they want, which when we don't even know that. I think it harms it from a spectator's point of view, because how difficult it is to become a new spectator of rugby, because the laws or their interpretation of the law, how they're being, it has to change non-stop. And we're continually trying to create a game that supposedly everybody wants, and yet we're also being told, on the other hand, that our biggest challenge in the game is head injuries, and yet every law change does what? Tries to speed the game up, have more ball in play time. So you want to do away with long periods around scrums. Why? People don't get head injuries in scrums, but they get them in tackles, so you want more tackles. People talk about caterpillar rucks take too long, so we want more ball in play time, more tackles. That would be more head injuries. So at some stage, we've got to just go, what is it we want? Do we want to try and have a set number of laws that coaches work around, work with, find different ways of playing. If you've got a particularly strong pack, you might play in one way. If you've got a particularly great set of backs, you might play in a different way. But they don't need to just try and force people into how you play. Teams will adapt as things happen. There won't ever be just one way of playing rugby. But we seem to be a sport that keeps telling people how they play and telling coaches how they have to coach. Instead of it being an innovative coaching process, it's just all about changing the laws. I think that, to me, is becoming quite frustrating. Once you've been in the game for quite a long time, particularly as a coach, it just gets more and more frustrating.
I'll tell you one rule, which I think is absolutely ridiculous, is not letting people take the quick line outs after someone else has touched the ball. I think that's ridiculous. Probably get rid of that. Stupid rule. No, that was it. So when you get advantage, say you play 5 minutes of advantage, right? And now the clock's in the red, but it was on 75 minutes before, 76 minutes. Why don't we then bring the clock back? Because you could score 2 tries in that time, but now because you've used the advantage, you might have to just take the 3 to get the losing bonus point, whereas you could, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you actually lose time by being played. I don't know. That was one that I thought of. So I think personally, the clock should then roll back, but then you'd have such a long game, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
See two sides to the coin.
I wouldn't change a hell of a lot around rules. I think the essence of rugby, has stayed pretty much the same for a long time. I think I would just, probably put more pressure on the coaching, to be honest, to have, do the rules actually need to be changed, or does the quality of coaching and the skill execution of the players need to be improved? Because that's how I sort of see things. You want to protect players. How we coach cleanouts or tackle technique, things like that. That's is that a question about the rules, or is it actually improving coaching and making the players better? But that's probably how I sort of look at it a little bit more than what's wrong with the rules. I think the rules, as a general rule of thumb, are okay. They've been pretty much there for a long time, but how do we play the game better?
I think we need to be careful not to tinker too much, to be honest. I think that some of the new rules have been brought in for sound reasons, but I think our product is good at the moment. I think there was a little bit of a scare when there was no crowds, but I think all sports were affected by having no crowds, and I think that anyone who's watched the Autumn Internationals or who's watched the various competitions around Europe over the first couple of months of the season can be confident that the game's in a good place.
There's probably a few things around the rookie. I don't know if you watched the Saracens against Sale game yesterday, but what Saracens did around the defensive ruck, where they, because on the maul now they're saying that players on the side are able to, once the ball's out, they can attack the 9, which is makes it very, very messy, hard for the referees to interpret that as well. So that's probably the big thing I'd love to see, is making sure that offside line is being policed, because once that ball's taken out, what Saracens tried to do at the weekend is they build their defensive ruck, and then they're crabbing players around the side. It was one of the first times we've seen that, and then so once the ball is out of that ruck, then those players are coming alive from a defensive point of view. But it really was tweaking the rules. So I'd love to see a proper offside line there. On the maul, because obviously it brings the maul into play as well. So that's one part of the law changes that you'd love to see, because otherwise it muddies the water in terms of what the defensive team are allowed to do, which it's going to give another slight advantage to the defence. And for entertainment piece, I think you always want to try and slightly favour the attack, reward good defence for sure, but hopefully you understand what I mean.
In the game, it's probably needs a little bit of tidying up in terms of just the interpretation of a tackle on a ruck. That's probably where most indecision comes for people within the game and understanding the decisions. But what is remarkable, I suppose, is I think the capacity for people to work through difficult periods in the game, whether it be a coach or players or officials. I think what's great is that that level of respect has stayed, and people are able to portray messages through the proper medium to make sure that our game gets better.
The Heineken Champions Cup live all season long on Off the Ball. A reminder, Wasps versus Munster is live on OTB Sports this Sunday at 3:15pm. You can listen to that on the OTB Sports app. It is 20 minutes past 9. It's time for us to welcome Ronan Mullen to the show. Ronan, good morning to you.
Hey lads, how's it going?
Yeah, good. So Katie Taylor's fighting this weekend. I'm not going to lie, I had a little look after her interview with Donald McRae at the odds of her opponent, because the conversation wasn't about Sharapova. And although she said all the right stuff, there was a long-term plan in place. And we all know in boxing, when you start making long-term plans, that something punches you in the mouth. So how good an opponent is Sharapova for Katie Taylor this weekend?
Well, you compare it to the last fight she had against Jennifer Han, and on paper they're quite similar in the sense that both mandatory opponents, not exactly household names either. And the Han fight, as we spoke about on the show around that time, was quite underwhelming build-up. The fight itself was rather underwhelming, and I think Katie was underwhelmed by it, to be frank. She was basically saying Han didn't come to win. She was quite negative in her approach. She went there to survive, and that's what she did in Leeds. What you can say about Sharapova is, while she's probably similarly untested at this level, she's got the punch power to trouble Katie. She's got that come forward aggression that Katie has possibly struggled with in the past against other opponents. And she's definitely coming to win. You look at her social media utterances and some of the other things she's saying. She said she'd knock out Katie Taylor or Conor McGregor on the same night, this kind of thing. So at least she's bringing that sort of brashness and bravado to proceedings. So in that sense, I think Katie can get up for this one a bit more. And as we've touched on probably ad nauseum for the listeners over the last few years, the Amanda Serrano fight looks like it will be resurrected for springtime. So that's a very appetising card for Katie should she come through this one. Serrano fights on December 18. If they both come through these, I think it's all but done for New York in the spring. For New York, okay, that's interesting, because we weren't sure where that was going to be in the end. New York kind of suits everybody, really. There'd be a massive Irish crowd there. Yeah, there was some implication. I think it was more fans trying to get the fever up, that possibly you could pair up Michael Conlan's world title fight, which is also kind of been mooted for March, and have them both in the big room at Madison Square Garden, which would, needless to say, would have been an amazing occasion. I'm not sure the dates are going to quite tally up in that regard. So I think Katie probably looking more around April. Like, come what may, I think it will be stateside. I think New York would be the number one target for it. But as we know, Katie's fought she's fought in Philadelphia, Boston, all along the East Coast. She's fought elsewhere in the US. So I think that's probably her home base, as it were, from a pro boxing point of view. So I think she'd be happy enough to go into Serrano's backyard and that, like, not to move away from the fight upcoming. But I think if this fight was made a couple of years ago between Taylor and Serrano, I think Taylor would have been a prohibitive favourite. Now I think Serrano's put a nice little run together, and I think it's probably closer to 50-50 than it ever was if they meet next year.
What else is on the Katie Taylor medium to long-term checklist other than beating Amanda Serrano?
It's a difficult one. Like, I kind of think of the Tom Brady comparison with Taylor, whereby she talks about fighting until she's 40, and a couple of years ago, I was kind of dismissing that as maybe putting that time frame out there so that people don't keep asking her, like, how long are you going to do it for? How long are you going to do it for? But now I very much get the impression she's serious about that. So beyond Serrano, there's other marquee opponents like Jessica McCaskill, who she's beaten in the past and has since put a pretty impressive run together. So Katie beating her would basically make her another division of to conquer onto her belt. So I think that's kind of what she's thinking in that regard. But I think Serrano is the prime focus for the moment. Like, she's dealt with the Delphine Pursuin rivalry for now. There are other maybe up and coming fighters like Chantel Cameron that she could face. But I think it definitely is a medium to long term plan for Katie at the moment. I'm not getting the impression yet that she's ready to check out. How dangerous is it for us to be having these conversations? Because if we're having them and everybody else is having them, like, we know boxing is not random, on balance the best fighter wins, but it is a sport where your opponent can hit you with one punch and that's the end of it. Absolutely. Like, this has been the year of the underdog as well. Like, we need not look further than our own Kiko Martinez. Can we claim him? I think we can claim him. He's kind of quasi-Irish at this stage, but he is world champion again. Like, out of nowhere, knocked out Kid Galahad a few weeks ago as a rank outsider in Kid Galahad's hometown. He's once again world champion. So Kiko, and then probably the fight of the year, upset of the year, George Kambosos beating Teofimo Lopez. Again, unbelievable. Nobody would have picked it beforehand. So while sometimes in boxing, sometimes you don't know until you know, kind of thing. And I think Sharapova, though she hasn't been tested, has, like, in theory, a decent, like, medley of talent that could possibly trouble Taylor. I'm not going to say she's going to win, but she got punching power. Like, she's over half her wins have been by stoppage, and she's got Sofia Ochagava in her corner, in the sense that she's been in training camp with her for the last few weeks and months. So she's got the kind of blueprint to maybe give Taylor some problems. So I think in that sense, there is levels of intrigue to this that possibly wouldn't be present for Kit Taylor's other mandatory defences. So it's definitely one worth tuning in for on Saturday, I think. And if it does set the table for Serrano in March or April, I think all the better.
One of the issues is go on.
So I was going to ask, is there like a 10-year anniversary Ochagava-Taylor fight on the cards next year potentially?
Well, Ochagava, it's a funny one. Like, I think she made her debut a few months before Taylor made her pro debut, which was 5 years ago in November there. And she's only, like, she's going to fight on Christmas Day, Ochagava. That'll be her 6th pro fight, I think. So she's kind of really spaced out her pro prospects so far. But I think it's definitely one that could be easily resurrected if both of them were minded to do so, because I think they're quite cordial outside the ring from my experience, but it's more like Ochagava just can't get over the London Olympics, whether she's got merit to that argument or not. She's kind of was surprised visibly in the ring that she didn't get the decision and has been talking about it for the decade since. So I think there's definitely an inbuilt narrative if they wanted to get it on, but it's a helpful one to have for this fight upcoming, because Sharapova has been leaning on it, saying nobody knows how to beat Katie Taylor better than Ochagava. She's got the blueprint, these kinds of things. The only thing, and Taylor's flagged it herself, Ochagava and Sharapova are polar opposites in terms of styles. Like, Ochagava was an elite technician, whereas Sharapova is more of a come-forward fighter and will be looking to trouble Taylor with big shots rather than like crisp counters or this kind of thing. So while there's probably some reason that she's dropping that name in there, I don't think it's going to be a huge factor come fight night. But for journalists, it's a handy one to have to build the whole thing around.
Okay, the Serrano fight, one of the reasons why we were hearing that it wasn't being made up to this was difficulties about agreeing the pre-fight rules and testing and all that kind of stuff. Has all that been parked, Ronan, as far as you know? Is the current information that everybody will sign up to whatever pre-fight requirements are expected of fighters at this level?
Yeah, well, that's one of many issues that's kind of hampered this fight. Like, this, in theory, this should have been made 3 years ago, but it finally came together for May of 2020. So that would have been just as the pandemic had started. So that's kind of why it was scuppered. It was then refixed for August of 2020. And Serrano basically saying the terms had changed, because there's no fans in attendance, she's not getting the money she had signed up for, kind of thing. And then Delphine Pursoon stepped into the breach and so on. So that's kind of changed. The testing shouldn't be an issue for the moment. Also, the Jake Paul side of things, where Amanda Serrano is under Jake Paul's auspices at the moment. He's basically her promoter by all intents and purposes. So that's kind of given her a bit of leverage that she didn't have before, where Katie has the power formerly of Sky Sports, now of DAZN, and obviously Matchroom, Eddie Hearn, the behemoth that has become. So she always had the negotiating power. Now I think that's a little bit more even as well. So there's probably no reason this can't happen. And like, I was mentioning the cordial relationship between Ochagava and Taylor. Like, Serrano and Katie didn't like each other, and I still probably don't, but you see Serrano liking her stuff on social media and vice versa. So there's kind of an understanding that it's in both of their best interest to get this on, because it could, in the ring, it's probably the best fight that can be made in women's boxing. And I think they're both of a profile whereby it can certainly be built as a mainstream event, a crossover event that can draw in new fans. And I think that's what we all want for boxing.
And £1 million purse for both of them.
Absolutely. And like, Taylor, she's in quite a short career, like, comparative to what other counterparts may have done that have gotten to this level where she's an undisputed champion, 2-weight world champion. She's done it in quite quick fashion, and she's got some really heady names on her record. And I think Serrano would just be the crowning one if she can put that together, because this is another serial world champion who's conquered several divisions. And if Taylor can basically like firm up her credentials as the number one number one women's boxer of all time, and certainly of this generation. Clarissa Shields and the likes might have something to say about that, but I think if Taylor can get a name like Serrano on a record, that would just copper fasten things.
All right. A question from Mark Dunning on YouTube. When and where does Ronan expect Fury versus White to happen? This is the WBC yesterday ordering the fight in springtime 2022. We keep getting these fights ordered that are going to be grand, as opposed to anybody ordering, well, like, just get the good fights, just get the great fights, because there's a limited amount of time here, lads. Come on, let's do it.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad the bureaucracy is done with, because Dillian White's been mandatory challenger for about 20 years at this stage. So I think he's probably due his world title fight. And of the fights on the table for Fury, I think this is the most appetizing one. I think Chris McKenna was reporting they're looking at the Millennium Stadium or the Manchester Arena for that one. So I think it'd be a good homecoming fight for Fury. And White brings, some jeopardy to the thing. I think he's got some tools that can trouble Fury. Like, you've got the spectre of the Joshua against Usyk rematch, and there has been some talk in recent weeks that Saudi Arabia are willing to put up the money to give Joshua to step aside and let Fury fight Usyk for all the belts, because that's what we've been trying to have for the last few years, where between Wilder, Fury, Joshua, we couldn't get all the belts on the line, and now we're one fight away from that. So if Fury fights Usyk, we can have one undisputed champion. And yeah, as I said, I think Saudi Arabia were saying, I think Joshua wants something like 40 million to step aside, and who can blame him? Why should he step aside when he can just jump back in the ring with Usyk? So I think the most likely outcome for the moment is that Joshua will fight Usyk in the springtime, and not long after you'll have Fury against White. So we can't ask fairer than that. If those turn out to be semi-finals, yeah, we'll be happy enough when the winners fight each other.
Well, that's the thing. They could turn out to be semi-finals, and there could be no final. It could be like one of those FA Cups during the war. It's like, they just didn't play it. Or the All-Ireland in 1880 whatever year. It's like, eventually got played in 1922. So, like, can we guarantee that the winners will fight?
I don't know, like, to that end, maybe the Saudi Arabian option, not to use this terminology, is the more like appetizing one, where maybe if they can find an agreement with Joshua that he could step aside and let Fury and Usyk fight, and then we could have a de facto champion. Then we know who the number one guy is. Like, Bob Arum has been saying that Tyson Fury would have beaten Muhammad Ali, these kinds of things, and it's hard to argue with Fury's position atop the pedestal in the division at the moment. But in order to really underline it, he has to gather up all the belts, and I think he'd want to do that against Usyk if possible. So that is still in play, I think, and something that I never thought was in play, because Joshua's not so inclined to basically pave the path for the likes of Fury to win belts ahead of him. But I think if the money is plumped up, he would do that, and then we would get what we want in that regard. But I think the fight, belts aside, I think the fight people want to see is Joshua against Fury. So I think come what may, that will eventually happen. We just don't want it to get to the Lennox Lewis versus Mike Tyson era, where they fight in 5 years' time, and while it does big numbers, nobody really cares anymore.
Or Mayweather Pacquiao, it was too late, and like a plague on all the houses of the people who prevented that from happening. Because
but then you've got Kell Brook against Amir Khan in next year, and
exactly.
when this was being talked about, I was like, I don't care. Who cares about that anymore?
Well, now you
and
do.
Then I watched the press conference. And I'm like, geez, I love this fight. They're going to be straight up and like each other.
Neither of them are as good as they could have been. Like, look, maybe the fight will still be amazing, and in 30 years' time, when the short video gets made of their careers, this ends up being part of the highlights reel, and we all forget the fact that it was 5 years too late, but they were of some kind of equal standards at the point where the fight was made, that it's a great fight. I don't know.
Ronan, can Tyson Fury recover from the huge family setback that is Tommy Fury's cough and broken rib?
Oh, this has been a nightmare of a promotion from day one, really, hasn't it? I don't know, it just never seemed like it was going to come together. I'm not to cast aspersions on the otherwise ironclad credentials of Tommy Fury, but I just never had an impression this fight was going to happen. And like, while Tyron Woodley, I think, is stepping into the breach to fill in, will he be resurrected next year and come back into the fray? I'm not sure, but the Jake Paul experience is still alive and well known, so we don't have to worry about that. That's still the main attraction for boxing fans over the world, I'm sure.
One of the most influential people in boxing is how he keeps getting written about, and look, that's the 2021 for you. Ronan, good stuff. Thanks a million for joining us. Cheers.
Nice one, lads. Thanks.
Ronan Mullen giving us his thoughts there. A reminder, OTB AM brought to you by Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with our new and improved razors. Tomorrow, We're going to hear from Luke Fitzgerald. We're talking Champions League, and Jess Kelly has your Christmas gift guide for you. The Club Championship show with AIB is live on OTB Sports from 10:30 this morning. You can listen live on the OTB Sports app or watch on our social channels. Right now, we're bringing you some highlights from the Paul McShane interview on the football show with Joe Malloy last night. Enjoy.
Still Joe Malloy with you this evening. Hopefully Paul McShane on a better connection. You're there, Paul?
Yeah, hi Joe.
Yeah, much better. Lovely. So on the player coach role then at Manchester United there with their under 23s, how important was it to you that there was still a playing role involved?
Yeah, I just thought it was the perfect transition. I thought I could ease off the playing side and then eventually just go full on coaching. So I thought it was a no-brainer. I thought that it was I had more longevity in that role, and I could have maybe played for another year or two in the league. But to be honest, this was perfect for me. So I jumped at it.
And have you been playing much?
Yeah, I've been training quite a bit. When I first joined, I played quite a few games straight away in pre-season, and then I've played, I think, 3 in the league and 2 in the EFL Trophy. Yeah, it's been quite demanding, to be honest, with the training and coaching, because it's you don't realise how much coaching takes it out of you. I played the EFL Trophy game against Sunderland on the Wednesday night, and I went coaching on the Thursday, and then on the Friday I was in bits. My calves were hanging off, so I had to sort of I had to sit it out for a couple of weeks. Well, not a couple of weeks, about 3 or 4 weeks. But in that time I was still coaching, thinking, I'm not playing, I'm looking after myself, but I was still standing. And I actually irritated a standing tendon in my calf, so it sort of summed up my career towards the end, to be honest with you, with those silly injuries that I was getting. But I'm back training now, and I've been training now for the last 2 or 3 weeks, and I've been on the bench for the 23s, so looking to get a game soon, hopefully.
Yeah. So you spent most of your career Premier League level, Championship level. Your final stint at Rochdale was in League One. How does the cut and thrust of senior football compared to under 23s football?
Yeah, it's quite different. It's I think lads who can get out on loan, it's a great learning experience for them, because I think when you're in that academy setup and you're in Manchester United, it's all quite rosy and stuff. But I think when you go out and start playing men's football and you're playing for points and people are playing for their livelihoods, it's a different ball game altogether. So it's good to get that learning experience with the loans. But there's a lot of talent at the club. But I've seen in my career that it takes much more than talent to make a career in the game.
Yeah.
I try and help lads, little bits of advice here or there without scaring the hell out of them.
I wonder, is that part of the reason they chose you? I mean, I'm sure, look, you've obviously made an impression on them with your attitude, and they obviously think there's a coach in there as well. But it might be worthwhile for certain young players to see that whether they're preparing for life at Old Trafford, which is, big ask, and there's only so many that can make it at Old Trafford. You're an example of somebody who's forged a brilliant career away from Old Trafford. So that's, that plants that seed in their mind as well, maybe. It's been mentioned that there's not going to be, not everyone is going to get into Manchester United's first team, but it's, if you don't make it at Manchester United, it's not the end of the world. You can go on and you can make a very good career for yourself. So I think that was one of the reasons why they brought me back. I moved on from Man United and had a half decent career for myself. So it's I just try and help the lads as much as I can with bits of advice here and there, and just try and tell them to enjoy the journey as well, and to try and relax, because I know when I was in the youth team, I was quite mad, to be honest with you. I was very driven, and I think I was gripping the bat too tight at times, and I try and tell the lads to try and enjoy the journey and learn as much as you can, and but it's great to speak to the young lads and to see where their mentalities are at, and I don't know, I'm waffling on here a little bit, but it's all
really interesting stuff. How much more difficult is it? Maybe it's not more difficult, actually. I'm putting words in your mouth here. Compare coming through as a young player at Manchester United now as opposed to when you were trying to do it in 03-04 territory.
The same sort of principles are there. You know, it's like it's a dog-eat-dog world when you're trying to make a career in football. You can see this sort of, you know, when I'm 35 now and I'm looking at the young lads in training, and I can see they're, you know, just young lads like with their insecurities and stuff, and I try and tell them not to be thinking too much and to just relax. We're training. If you make a mistake, don't worry about it. I just try and fill them with as much confidence as I can. But one of the big things that I've noticed is definitely the social media aspect of it and the mobile phones. It's quite a big change since when I was there. Does
that affect the team environment? Are they all in dressing rooms on their phones and not talking to each other increasingly?
There's a lot of that. Yeah, there is a lot of people sort of in their phones, but we've been trying to slowly knock it out of them a little bit. But it's a tough job, to be honest.
Yeah.
You could easily you could try and ban phones, but then you'll have the lads going underground to look at their phone.
I'm just nipping out to the toilet. We'll be back in a minute.
Yeah, exactly. So you have to sort of accept that that's the way of the world at the minute, but also you have to try and stamp it out, like, you know, phones in the gym and phones in the dressing room before games. And, you know, I've been in dressing rooms before, not even the academy, where I've seen lads check their phone at half time, and it's incredible. So I try and keep my eye on that, and without really nailing them, I try and sort of, you know, say, come on now, lads, phones away, concentrate on the game, sort of thing.
Yeah, I guess you don't want to be walking around every 5 minutes saying, back in my day, lads.
Yeah, I know. You become a bit of a policeman, you know, when you're trying to stamp out everything. So you have to pick your battles wisely.
In terms of talent and technical ability, has there been another leap forward from your era, or no?
I don't know really. Like, we had some really good players coming through, but sort of similar, I'd say.
Similar, yeah.
Yeah, I'd say it's similar, because we had a great crop that came through Man United at that time. In those few years, there was like, you know, was Kieran Richardson, Mads Tim, Gerard Piqué, Fraser Campbell, Giuseppe Rossi, David Jones, Phil Bardsley, a lot of lads that went on to have
Johnny
very
Evans,
good.
your territory as well. Yeah.
Ryan Shawcross, Danny Simpson. There was loads and loads. So those few years created a lot of players. So it's really hard to compare.
Yeah.
You know, back then you're just sort of, you're so caught up in it all that you don't really know what's going on, to be honest with you. So I don't know. There's a lot of talented players here, really, really good. And I think a lot of them will go on and have very good careers.
And has Carrington changed much?
It has a little bit, even though I've not actually been in the main building that many times since being back, because of the whole COVID rules. The first team are in their bubble, so it's you know, you only see them every now and again, or train with them every now and again. So it's I've not actually been in the main building, but I think that's changed a lot. We're in the academy building just across the car park. So it's pretty much the same, with, you know, little bits of stuff added onto it.
The under-23s, so like formerly the reserves, just strikes me as a strange kind of ecosystem, in that you've those on the way up, maybe a few on the way down. You've got McShane in there in the middle of it, and not many people want to be in the under-23s for all that long. And I presume in the midst of all that, you're still trying to create some kind of team spirit and togetherness. So, you know, that's an odd kind of world to be inhabiting, I would think.
Yeah, it's a little bit different to what I've been used to over the years. But we've got quite a young under-23s team, so the majority of them are 18. So they're quite, you know, fresh into it and really, really eager.
Okay.
So the majority of them are really good lads, and when they go out onto the pitch, they want to give it their all, because you know, it's so competitive here that, you know, everyone's trying to make a career for themselves. But you know, the team changes constantly. You could have lads come down from the first team. We've got some certain lads who will probably be looking to go on loan in January. So it is a little bit of a strange dynamic. We played Everton. We played Everton there near the start of the season, and it kicked off a little bit at the end of the game, and some young lad off Everton pushed me, and I was like, "Oh, come on, mate!" I said, "I'm 35 here," and he said, "You're 30," and he said, "You're 35 and you're still playing in the reserves. You must be rubbish." And I was like, "Oh, come on." So yeah, it's funny that the games are a little bit different, but they're good.
And have many first teamers come down and played?
There's been Tom Heaton, Dean Henderson, Phil Jones, Anthony Alanga, who plays quite a lot in the 23s. He's always with the first team training though. And that's been pretty much it, I think. Amad Diallo plays a little bit.
Yeah. Phil Jones gave a very interesting interview in the Sunday Times about a month ago, and he was just talking about what a horrible time it's been for him with injury, and you know, there were comments made publicly. I think Rio Ferdinand was saying, God, he's taken up a place that should be used by someone else, and Jones almost came out to defend his corner and say, nobody knows what I've been through over the last couple of years, and he was talking about being abused in the streets and everything, Phil Jones. So kind of rooting for him privately to come through and do well. Is he moving okay?
Yeah, he's been good. Yeah, he's just working behind the scenes. He's, you know, it's tough for him because he's not the Champions League squad, so he's sort of looking where his next game's going to be. So I think I don't know what his thoughts are, but he's just trying to get as much game time, and that's why he's played a few times in the 23s. But he's working hard behind the scenes, and you know, it's awful when you do get them injuries and you're just trying to find the momentum, but you keep on hitting a block. So you know, Phil Jones. He's a good lad, and he's just trying to keep his head down and get back to full fitness.
So, like, are you and the 23s coaching staff? Are you there to win the 23s league? Is that important to anyone? Are you there to coach and develop? Are you there just give lads game time and see who rises to the top? What's your remit? How is the 23s perceived in a club like Manchester United?
It's definitely about developing the player. I don't think there's a major emphasis on having to win the 23s league.
Yeah.
If we wanted to win the 23s league, we'd be, you know, I think there'd be lads who are 21, 22 playing in the team all the time, but we're quite a young team in the league, and it's just about getting players, as many players into the first team as possible. So yeah, it's more developing the player and giving players different challenges, whether it's like a player coming up from the 18s or maybe someone just playing out of position the odd time, and so it's more developing the player.
Yeah, I'm sure memories have come flooding back to you from your time at United, even just being around the place again. That was an interesting thing you said about almost not enjoying the journey and holding on a bit too tight. So you were uber driven, uber serious at the time. I was. Uber serious. Yeah. Did you enjoy it in your own way?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did enjoy it in my own way. I did. Yeah. You know, when it goes well, it's great. It's really good. I met some amazing people along my journey, and but you know, at 16, when I came over at 16, you know, you'd hear all the horror stories about, you know, the small percentage of players that only make it over here, and you know, people getting homesick and whatever. But you know, in my mind, I'm thinking there's not a chance I can go home here. So I was.
Why not?
Every day.
Why not? Why were you thinking that way?
Just basically probably the shame of it, you know, going over and people saying, giving you the stats of so many people making, and then, you know, you're just another stat sort of thing if you don't make it. So I was desperate to make it, to be honest. So every day was as if it was my last day here. You know, so sometimes when you go through a tough patch, I'd be really down. You know, if I had a bad training session, I used to carry it around with me for about a week, for the full week, or a bad game would last for maybe 2-3 weeks. So it was, it's tough. You know, it's a tough career, and everyone's trying to, well, not everyone, but a lot of people are trying to make a career in the game. And as I said before, it's a bit of a dog-eat-dog world.
I'm sure it is. Maybe you needed to be that way, though. Maybe if you didn't take it that seriously, you wouldn't have been as good a player. I mean, you'll never know. I mean, the other side of the coin is if you relaxed and enjoyed it more, you might have been a better player. But I don't know. Some players are of a certain mould. Like, I know you're not saying you're Roy Keane, but I feel Roy Keane needed to be on edge to be at his best. You struck me as the kind of player who needed to be wound up to be at his best as well.
To be honest, I'd say so, because I knew I wasn't technically gifted as the players over here, and I knew I had to maybe, but I didn't know I had to do it a different way. But I just found my natural abilities was aggression, my determination, my desire to do more, to train more. So I always took confidence in that I always, going into games, I knew I didn't cut any corners going into games, and that's where I got my confidence from. And I was that sort of player. I wasn't the relaxed sort of flair player. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Do you remember, because I know you went on a pre-season friendly to the States and played against Bayern Munich, I think centre half Roy Keane alongside you, which must have been an experience, but do you remember being influenced by any of the first team players around that time, just seeing them go about their business, anyone who struck a chord with you or left an impact on you which you took for the rest of your career?
Well, I was just all of them, because I was surrounded by so many world-class players at the time. Roy being one, he was a big influence on me. He was a role model for me growing up, and then to be training with him every day at times, and to play with him sometimes, it was amazing. He was my biggest influence, because I've seen how he was. I've seen how he prepared for games, and I used to see him eat fruit before his dinner, and in team meals. So I sort of took that on for quite a few years.
If Roy Keane eats fruit before dinner, I'm having fruit before dinner.
Yeah, I wonder if he's still doing it now. I doubt it. But
did it take some getting used to be around someone of that aura, to be yourself, to be relaxed in that company, or did that happen pretty quickly?
No, I don't think I'll be relaxed in his company now, to be honest. It's because I always held him in on a high pedestal. But yeah, you get used to it. Then he was obviously my manager at Sunderland, and then assistant manager in the Irish team. So it became a little bit more comfortable.
Yeah. Who else in that team? What era we're talking about here? Van Nistelrooy would have been there. Would you have gone up against him?
Yeah, Ruud van Nistelrooy was. Yeah, he was. I really liked Ruud. I'd see him. I try and tell the young lads as well that when the strikers are doing shooting sessions where they're a little bit tentative of actually really going for it. I always tell this a story that I remember seeing Ruud van Nistelrooy doing shooting sessions, and it was either rocketed in the bottom corner or top corner, or was 100 yards over the bar, and he didn't care because he was practicing. But with young lads, they can get a little bit embarrassed in front of their peers, and I just try and tell them to forget all that. You're here to train, you're here to make mistakes, and the best players in the world do that, like Ruud van Nistelrooy. So that was a good learning. Good learning from Ruud van Nistelrooy. But then there was there's Cristiano Ronaldo. Seeing him every day in the gym and seeing how hard he trained. Rio Ferdinand, Vidic, Gary the Neville's, Ryan Giggs. I've seen him doing yoga, 2 or 3 times a week. Louis Saha, Quinton Fort, how hard they worked in the gym with their injuries, and just loads. And I was like, I could go on for forever. But it's I was lucky to be surrounded by such great professionals at the time. So it sort of rubbed off on me, and I took that throughout my career.
I can imagine, yeah. And so what an interesting thing to get a glimpse at how that dressing room behaved, say, so early on in your career. Then across the next 15, 16, 17 years, you're experiencing lots of other dressing rooms and how those dressing rooms behave and operate. Was there a difference between those, it's got a terrible word to use, those lesser teams, say, and Manchester United, the gold standard, or were there pretty good pros everywhere?
There wasn't as many good pros. There was good pros. There was quite a few good pros that I'd come across. But when I first left Man United and in the years following, I took it very hard to understand why people weren't giving it their all. You know, I just thought that, come on, like, that's the way it's got to be. I think it was that grounding at Man United that I had, that I couldn't understand why people weren't professional, why people didn't train their hardest every day, why people weren't trying to get better every day. So yeah, I did find that a little bit difficult when I first left Man United, but you sort of learn to accept things.
Mm. We have David Myler often on the show, by the way, former teammate of yours. He was talking about you recently, so it seems like you guys had a fun, fiery relationship. Have a listen.
I don't even know where to start. I've had more arguments, I think, with Paul McShane than I've had with my wife. But it was just, you know, it was two lads who were desperate to win, and winning came first. The team came first. The first one me and McShane had was 2013. I just remember it fondly. But we played Barnsley away, and if we, if we'd won, we were promoted automatic. We'd finished second. We'd have been too far ahead of Watford. And we're going to Barnsley, behind the goal. You know, we'd 5,000 Hull fans. A cross had come in from a corner. So I was at the front post, or the front area, say, just in front of the front post. Paul was behind me. Paul called for it. I headed it clear. They won the second phase, put it back in. They scored from it. Basically ended up going on to beat us 2-0. But he went mad at me after because he called for the ball, and he would have, no doubting, he would have headed the ball further. And then I was like, oh, I've got to head the ball. He says a few things. I say a few things. Next minute, we're head to head. Then, like, Steve Bruce comes in and is like, sit down and shut up the pair of you. And that was kind of it. And then on the Monday, Paul came to me and says, Dave, about Saturday. And I said, don't worry about it. I said, like, and that was kind of like me. I don't know, was that a good thing? Because I said to Paul, don't worry about it. Like, just let's not even talk about it and move on. Like,
that sounds okay to me. That's two pros doing their thing.
yeah, it was. Yeah, it was. That was some game. That was, because it was. I think the last 3 or 4 games of that season, we had the bottom 3 teams, so we just needed to win one game,
right?
And we didn't win any of them. Then we had Cardiff on the last day of the season, which they were top of the league. So it was. It was pressure times. I remember those last couple of weeks, I could hardly speak to anybody just because I wanted to get over the line.
I'm with Myler, by the way. I think if he's there and able to head the ball, he heads it clear.
No, this was clearly my ball. This was Joe. I gave him a loud shout. I'm coming for it, and I think he just flicked it down to the edge of the box, and then O'Grady, I think it was Chris O'Grady, finished it. But it was just like leading up to. I think it was just before the game. Might have been in the training. Snapchat had just come out that week or something, and I could just hear a Snapchat talk on the bus, and then that just wound me up. So I think I said that to him after the game. I was just saying that, you know, your head was on Snapchat instead of the game, which was probably very unfair of me. But yeah, it was just you know, as Dave said, it was just two lads wanted to succeed, and I was just dying to get over the line to get back to the Premier League, and thankfully we did anyway.
Yeah, I can imagine. So I guess, look, you described this role as a no-brainer, this role at Manchester United, and you get to keep playing a little bit and still get a touch of a football and, you know, play even Stadium of Light, that Sunderland game you mentioned. So you're still sort of a player, but it's definitely a segue into coaching. Has there been a period of, I don't want to go overboard here, but like a certain sadness or a certain goodbye to being Paul McShane, the full-time player? Have you had to kind of accept that and say goodbye to the playing career in a sense?
Not really. I've sort of been eased off it, to be honest. It's not as if I've gone straight into cold turkey where I'm totally missing it. Some days I'm thinking, you know, when I'm with when I'm getting ready for training, or I'm with the staff in the staff room talking about training, and I'm thinking, I'm thinking, do you know what? I wish I was just coaching today and just like taking it easy, because some days I'm thinking, I've got to run around and chase after 17, 18-year-olds now for a couple of hours.
Hey, look, Ronaldo's still doing it. Come on.
Yeah, I know. Well, he's not defending. He's not running after these fellas, is he?
Well, he might have to now. He might have to now. You're going to be because I was half wondering if you were, do you get a taste of it, and I don't know. You see Ralph Rangnick walking by, you start doing a few QP uppies, a few sprints. Ralph, still got it.
Yeah, no. It's no, that the boat has sailed now, Joe. I'm looking now the longevity of having a coaching career at the minute, and it's gonna when the day comes where I eventually call it a day, it will probably be a little bit emotional, but I think I've been eased off it quite well with this role.
Yeah, it's a nice way to do it, I suspect. Yeah, I can see that.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.